right, Peppy, welcome to PEP 170. That's Pep or Planet Extra podcast. It's an offshoot of Planet America on ABC Australia, which you can see on Wednesdays at 10 p.m. on ABC TV and 8 p.m. on Fridays on ABC News, or anytime you like on iView or Facebook at ABC Planet America, or on YouTube on the ABC News In-Depth channel. On PEP, we cover all the stuff that's too nerdy for TV. If you're listening to us, you can also find PEP on YouTube and Facebook, where you'll also find timestamps and show notes in the blurb. And if you leave a comment under those videos, we're likely to see it. You can also tweet us at PEP Chaz, CHASDRDAVE. That's at Pep Chaz Dr. Dave. If you want to contact me privately, ask me on Twitter and I'll allow you to direct message or email me. But for now, let's say hi to the man who never raises the stakes on inconsequential views. It's Dr. Pepper himself, Dr. David Smith. Hello, Dave.
Hello, everyone. So I'm an associate professor at the United States Study Centre at the University of Sydney. Those are both wonderful institutions that I highly recommend, but let me stress, I don't speak for either of them. When I do PEP, I am, to use one of the words of the moment, unburdened by those institutions.
Now, for those who are watching us, you would see that there have been a few changes. I've changed positions.
Yeah.
But there's more than that. We got cans now.
We got cans.
And on top of that, we've got a little mixer here. I can see some levels here. I'm going to turn Dave up a little bit. I can't believe I can do this now.
That's amazing.
So if you're listeing to us, you'll hopefully hear us a bit better as well.
This is either going to be the best we've ever sounded or the worst we've ever sounded.
You're probably right, Dave. There's going to be a few changes from now on. This is only the first. We're going to take this podcast slightly more seriously than we have in the past.
Yeah, and the tech sheriff is in town.
Yes.
And he's a tall man by the name of Richard Cook.
Yes, Richard, you might recall the Try podcast.
Yeah.
Richie, that was the first time he'd ever actually paid attention to our tech setup, and he couldn't believe how amateur we were. So amateur, in fact, that he was determined to learn from scratch how to host a podcast.
It wasn't the first time he'd paid attention to our tech setup. It was the first time anyone had paid attention to our tech setup, apart from the Peppers, who I think have actually been trying to warn us about this for years.
They have.
But we just heedlessly ploughed on.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now Richie's taken us under his wing.
Yeah.
He's our mother hen. A lot of room under that wing. Now today there's basically one topic. We might spend a second or two on the convention, but it's one topic. It's Biden to Kamala Harris. So I'm gonna do correspondences in the Unleashed, which will also be a little bit different. Thanks, Richie. But so let's just get straight into the main topic. After of course, what you're grateful for. What are you grateful for?
Look, I'm really grateful that my recycling finally got collected after 4 weeks of accumulation.
A month.
Well, yeah, because it gets collected every 2 weeks. So after the mishap that I explained a couple of weeks ago, that meant that that's a month's worth of recycling.
Your recycling gets collected every 2 weeks?
Every 2 weeks.
Mine gets collected every week.
Well, la-di-da.
We live...
Mr. City of... No, sorry.
We live really close.
We do. But we actually live on opposite sides of a very crucial services divide.
There was a recycling.
Yeah.
Okay. What I'm grateful for is really easy, actually. This was a meme, but it was a good meme. So I'm going to bring it. I don't often bring memes to the table, but this one, this resonated for me. You might have already seen it because it is a meme. But it's true. This election now is the first election in my lifetime, and I'm old, where there isn't a Biden, Clinton, or Bush on the ticket.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah,
because it goes back to 1976, and I was born in 1977.
Yep.
I can't believe it's been that 48 years since there's been a Biden, Clinton, or Bush free election.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So I'm grateful for that. Amazing amounts of change. All right, let's get right into it. Let's start off with where we left off at the Try podcast.
Okay.
Which was, we left off with George Clooney, and Richie was speculating wildly about who was responsible. He said it was Nancy Pelosi, and we were like, yeah, okay, Rich, whatever you reckon, mate. Soon as we got off, the podcast, I started reading about who it actually was, and we got correspondence about this from Leftover Lover saying Katty K on The Rest is Politics suggests Obama signed off on the George Clooney op-ed. And that is indeed what I read. I read that Scarborough said that on Scarborough's show, and Scarborough is, of course, Biden's favourite person in the world. So that obviously came straight from Biden. Whether it's true or not, that's what Biden thought. Rachel Bade said Clooney contacted Obama before he wrote that op-ed, but, quote, Obama did not encourage or advise him on the op-ed, but he did not try to dissuade him either. Now, you can believe that if you like.
That's about as committal as Obama gets. These days.
Right.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's not great for Biden. And the Biden campaign's reaction was even worse for Biden, as far as I'm concerned, which was to unfollow Clooney on Twitter. Like, how petty and thin-skinned is that? Talking about which,
they're so good at this.
We had another correspondence about exactly these Trump-like traits, because I referred to Biden as being very Trumpish recently. And I mean, I've always thought he has a bit of Trump about him. I've always said that.
Okay.
But on this podcast many times. But Crowfoot said, surprised when Chaz was making his list of ways Biden has become similar to Trump, he didn't mention, just like Trump has approached legal cases by trying to run out the clock, Biden was doing exactly the same thing. Delay a week for an interview, delay another week for a press conference until he's officially the nominee. In fact, the attempted shooting of Trump actually helped Biden, most in the short term. A week of no one talking about Biden took him closer to being the nominee. No going back. I put that in the past tense because Crowfoot wrote that before Biden got gazumped.
And, I mean, he makes a reasonable point. My only correction to that would be the pause lasted exactly 2 days. It did not last a week. And when it came back, it was worse than ever for Biden.
They didn't let him have the pause. I mean,
No.
he wanted to have the pause, but they didn't let him.
No, it was, it might have been 3 days. It was, I remember by Wednesday of that week. Yeah.
Look, I'll throw in one more Trumpish thing, which I forgot to mention, which was Biden also, those few weeks, had a bit of I alone can fix it about him.
He did.
About, I'm the only person who can expand NATO and look after the Pacific.
Yeah.
He always referred obliquely to the Pacific, and no one ever knew what he was referring to.
Yeah.
But it was just him who could do it. Anyway, so Dave, talk to us about Biden's final week from hell.
So, allegedly, what actually pushed him over the top was finally being shown poll data from the swing states. Now, the way that it was reported, it was, internal Democratic polling that looked really bad. He wouldn't have needed to look at internal Democratic polling. He only would have needed to look at the publicly available polling. So the New York Times had a pretty good summary of it, showing both nationally, before the debate, they were essentially even. And after the debate, the shooting, the Republican convention, Biden was down by 3. That 3-point swing was replicated across every single swing state poll. It was amazingly uniform.
Yeah.
Basically nothing more, nothing less. 3-point swings. Of course, some of them are starting from a baseline of Biden already being 5 points down.
Yep.
But even where he, had appeared to be really close, he was now 4 points down. And the way that swing broke down was 2 points after the debate, then another 1 point after the shooting and the convention.
Yeah.
And, under normal circumstances, you might not see that as fatal, but there was just no sign that Biden could get better. There was absolutely no sign that it could improve. So the pressure campaign really did ramp up. Yeah. That was the week that Obama, he didn't exactly come out, but it was reported that he had been telling people that Biden's path was narrowing, which in Obama speak means not a chance in hell.
Yes.
Nancy Pelosi was continuing her campaign of awesome old person passive-aggressive power, and it was just clear that she wasn't going to let up. Like, it had really taken on kamikaze dimensions.
Yeah.
The donors were just not giving at all. Yep.
I was just going to add on Obama. I think it's the comments that were leaked about him were even worse than you just said, which was President Biden's path to victory has greatly diminished, and he thinks the president needs to seriously consider the viability of his candidacy, which for Obama is basically he set his hair on fire and he's running around.
Yeah.
Going,
but who knows? I mean, there was the possibility that the pressure campaign would just dig him in deeper.
Yes.
And as late as Trump's speech at the Republican National Convention, Maggie Haberman was blogging in a very Maggie Haberman way. Democrats who want Biden to step down are worried that the second half of this speech might convince him he can still win. But whether or not the pressure campaign had that effect, I am quite convinced by the fact that Biden suddenly realised he couldn't win.
Yeah.
That, everybody has moments of clarity. And I think, as I said, if you just looked at the publicly available polls by that point, the way that they were drifting and would undoubtedly have continued to drift, he must have realised it was over.
Yeah. I'll be talking about those polls in a sec. But But what I'd also say there was a few incidents which I think showed that things were getting worse for him, which I think for him wouldn't have been great. Number one, there was a period where he was on a call with the House Democrats.
Yes,
and he got into a row with Jason Crow, who's a very sensible Democrat and a well-respected veteran, and Crow argued that that he was worried that voters weren't going to trust Biden on national security.
That was a huge concern.
Yeah, it is a huge concern. I mean, like
the number of times I heard the button being mentioned, or things happening in the middle of the night. It was a major concern.
Yeah, and middle of the night, 6 p.m.
Yes, that's the middle of the Biden night.
Yes. And this was Biden's response. I'm going to read you the quote in full, and someone saw this call.
Yep.
It wasn't released publicly. Someone saw the Zoom call and transcribed it. So this is the transcript of Biden's argument in response. First of all, I think you're dead wrong about national security. Name me a foreign leader who thinks I'm not the most effective leader in the world on foreign policy. Tell me who the hell that is. Tell me who put NATO back together. Tell me who enlarged NATO. Tell me who did the Pacific Basin. He loves that Pacific thing. Tell me who did something that you've never done with your Bronze Star like my son. I'm proud of your leadership, but guess what? What's happening? We've got Korea and Japan working together. I put AUKUS together anyway. And then he stopped. Now I think we should just say that's gibberish, what I just read. Number one.
He mentioned AUKUS.
Yeah.
Wow.
He did. AUKUS. We featured in his in his brain stew. But also comparing Crow's Bronze Star to Beau Biden's is ridiculous because Beau Biden had a year-long JAG deployment.
Yeah.
And Crow did 3 tours in combat. Right. But leaving that aside, that was in black and white everywhere, and I reckon that would have been embarrassing.
Yeah.
That would have been very embarrassing. So that's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, I played this on Play America, but I should play this everywhere because this is incredible. He went on Black Entertainment Network to do an interview, right?
Yeah.
And bear in mind that his base at this point in time were black people, essentially.
Yes, yeah.
And so he was trying to sort of rally the base. And he said this about the black Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin.
Look at the heat I'm getting because I named the Secretary of Defense, a black man. I named Ketanji Brown. Because of the people I've named.
You might not have understood that clearly because it's Biden speaking, but he clearly forgot the name of his defense secretary, Lloyd Austin, and he called him that black man. Now, that's not the first time he's forgotten Lloyd Austin's name. He does it a lot.
And also kind of suggested he would have been nothing without Biden.
Yeah, there's a bit of that as well.
Yeah.
Also, he forgets Lloyd Austin's position, that the Secretary of Defense. He calls him the Secretary of Military a lot as well. This one, for example, to show you that this has happened before. This is from 2021.
I just want to thank you both, and I want to thank the former general. I keep calling him general, but the guy who runs that outfit over there. I want to make sure we thank the secretary for all he's done.
He clearly forgot his name. Like, even just after he appointed him, he forgot his name. So he's got a track record of this. But calling Austin that black man on BET,
Yeah.
that's a low. Right? Then, I also play some Play America, but it's worth everyone seeing this. Then, to try and cover up for all the controversy, he had this policy, and it was a smart policy, of trying to surround himself with the left.
Yeah.
Like, he tried to push a whole bunch of left-wing policy, right? And because those guys care enough about policy that they don't care what you're like.
Yes.
You can be a mumbling mess.
Yeah.
As long as you're pushing left-wing policy, Bernie's going to be in your corner, right? And so one of the policies he pushed out there was essentially national rent control.
Yeah.
Which was you can't increase for corporate renters, landlords who have more than 50 properties, can't increase their rent prices by more than 5% per year. That was the policy. Now, I'm not going to go into the details because it's not going to happen now. And also, it was a rubbish policy. Like, nothing was going to happen. It was all just for show.
Yeah.
But the important thing to take away here is an increase of 5% per year. Let me play you the big reveal where he announced this policy.
Look, folks, the idea that corporate-owned housing is able to raise your rent $300-400 a month or something, under what I'm about to announce, they can't raise it more than $55.
The thing I love about that is you can see him thinking, hang on, what's that? What's that? You can see him being confused as he's struggling to read the auto cue, and then him just taking a stab. And then after he takes that stab, you can see him thinking, I got that wrong. You can just tell. He knows he really screwed it up. But I mean, the bottom line is, this policy was not, like, it's so easy to remember 5%.
Yes.
He couldn't remember that. He couldn't remember that. He couldn't remember 5%.
$55.
It's so embarrassing. And he couldn't read an auto cue. The last thing that he could do up to this point was read auto cues. And he's losing the ability to do that now as well. So to me, that was the absolute low point. You could tell he knew it at the time.
Yeah.
So I reckon all these things sort of add up.
And this comes back to this point that he must have realised things were not going to get better.
Yeah.
These weren't campaign blips that could be overcome. These weren't polling dives that could be overcome. They were not going to get better.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. It's so you tell me then.
Yeah.
I'll say one more thing before I ask you this.
Yes.
The last final sign of his that he would have been thinking, I imagine, that he's probably in trouble. Is not only was his own campaign dumping on him in the press, like, and then NBC was running quotes from his campaign saying he needs to drop out. He will never recover from this. That's what one of his campaign officials.
Yes.
And another one said, no one involved in this effort thinks he has a path towards re-election. That's from his own campaign.
Yeah.
But the other thing was, the only person defending him publicly was Donald Trump.
Yes.
Who clearly wanted him to remain the candidate, to the point where Donald Trump was making points like this.
Sort of interesting. This guy goes and he gets the votes, and now they want to take it away. That's democracy. They talk about democracy. Let's take it away from him.
That was Joe Biden's argument, being advanced by Donald Trump. So that would have been a terrible sign. But Dave, okay, so tell me.
Yes.
Sure, he had a bad week. Sure, things were going bad. Sure, they were probably going to get worse. But why did he have to go?
I think that when he announced last year that he was running again, he was the one who actually removed the democratic process from all of this.
Yep.
Okay. Everybody stepped aside for him.
Yep.
They felt that party unity was so important. At that point, he didn't look like he was so far off the rails that he couldn't win. In fact, at the time that he was deciding to run, he had a substantial poll lead over Donald Trump.
Yep. And
Trump was looking a lot lower than he is now. But so he made this ego-driven decision to run. Now, I mean, Democrats would have realized by that point the dishwasher is broken.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. But, as often happens when the dishwasher breaks down, you think we can wash the glasses by hand for a while. We can wash everything by hand. And, it works for a while. But it's taking a lot longer. Things are not getting as clean.
Yep.
You're chipping plates.
Yep.
You try to wash the glasses when you're drunk and you find the next morning that you haven't really washed them at all.
My chosen analogy, I mean, that's a good one.
Yeah,
My
yeah,
chosen
yeah.
analogy is when the microwave starts to screw up and you start taping it. It can only take so much tape before you're going to die.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, but then when the dishwasher starts working again, you're like, holy shit, this is what it's actually supposed to be like.
Yes.
Like, this is how little time it's supposed to take. This is how clean everything's supposed to be. Everything's supposed to end intact. It's a pity that what took that realization was Joe Biden doing the dishes and basically saying, everything would be a lot easier if it was in smaller pieces, and just throwing everything to the floor, which is what happened during the debate.
Yeah.
But I think he must have as much as he was talking about, like, I was the one who got the votes, he got the votes because he did not give people the choice, right? Democrats realistically did not have a choice in that primary. Because if there was a moment of elite betrayal of the people, it was the moment where nobody challenged Biden. Nobody serious challenged Biden.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm sure that there was a whipping operation that had gone on. That was the point. Polls were consistently showing last year that 2/3 of Democrats didn't want Biden as their candidate. That dropped to about 50% when it became clear that he wasn't going anywhere. But by last week, it was out to 2/3 again, consistently in the polling. So Biden's argument that he was the one who was democratically put, he must have known that he was responsible for he was responsible for the fact there hadn't been a real contest. He had asked people to put a huge amount of trust in him.
Yeah.
And I think that even though he made a lot of bad decisions, even though I think his decision to run again was incredibly ego-driven, in the end, he at least had the decency to understand that this trust that had been put in him had been disastrously misplaced. And it had been misplaced because he had not been honest with himself about the condition that he was in, which meant that people around him were not honest with him or with anybody else. About the condition that he was in. When he saw that he actually couldn't win at all, then I think the decency that he's famed for did actually kick in. But it took a very long time.
Yeah, look, I will give him credit that he was behaving very Trumpishly over these few weeks, but unlike Trump, when he was given a stark illustration that if he serviced his own ego, he was absolutely 100% going to bring the party down.
Yes, yeah.
He chose the party.
Yes, he did.
And Trump in that position would not have chosen the party.
No.
So that we'll give him credit for that.
And to deal with the other Trump-Biden analogy, which Trump himself has already mentioned, there's a lot of difference between the winner of an election standing aside and the loser of an election not standing aside.
Yes, there is.
Okay? One is an active threat to democracy.
Yes.
The other is not.
Yes. Fair enough.
Big difference. But I'm going to have to make this point so many times over the next 3 months because Republicans have decided this is the greatest attack line ever.
Yeah.
Rather than doing what they should do, which is just don't mention the word democracy at all, because it never looks good when it's mentioned in the context of Donald Trump, they've decided, Joe Biden standing aside after winning the primaries, that's the real attack on democracy.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think it's a winning argument for them.
We will come back to that, but I agree with you.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd like to just highlight a couple of polls which I thought were instructive in latter day Bidenville. because in the top line numbers, Biden was largely holding the line in a lot of polls.
Yes, he was. Yeah.
Largely. I mean, but we were starting to see, as you say, some polls start to move.
Yep.
The like for instance, CBS moved from Biden being down 48 to 50 to Biden being down 47 to 52.
Yeah.
That 2-point margin turned into a 5-point margin in a
Yes.
couple of weeks,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And Trump being on 52 was basically unprecedented.
Yes.
He,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
never has a majority.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was
Yeah, the only previous poll in which he'd had majorities is that weird one that always ends up 50 to 51.
Oh, yeah.
So only in a poll which can go above 100 had Trump ever managed to get above 50. Yes, so seeing him above 50 was, in an actual poll was pretty alarming. Yes. Yeah.
And AP had a poll come out that week saying 65% of registered Democrats wanted Biden to withdraw from the election. That's not great when the Democrats are saying that. 27% of Democrats in the same poll felt extremely or very confident in Biden's mental acuity and his ability to serve effectively as president. 27% of Democrats.
All of them subscribe to Hopium Chronicles.
And 48% of Democrats said they were not very or not at all confident in his mental acuity or ability to serve effectively as president.
50.
Yeah, and by the way,
$5.
yes. And by the way, that's not in 4 years for the next 4 years.
Yeah.
That's full stop.
Yeah.
So 48% of them are saying they don't think he's quite right for president.
No.
Then there's the swing states. Emerson had Trump leading in Michigan by 3, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin by 5, the rest by more. YouGov had actually measured favorabilities of favorable impressions of Trump's 4 years versus Biden's 4 years.
Yes.
In the swing states.
Yeah.
Michigan, Trump had 45% favorability over his 4 years, Biden 39%. Arizona, Trump 51%, Biden 36%. Georgia, Trump 49%, Biden 42%. Nevada, Trump 50%, Biden 39%. Pennsylvania, Trump 47%, Biden 40%. Wisconsin, Trump 46%, Biden 39%. Hard to see how you win in the swing states when people on a basic their 4 years versus your 4 years choose the other person's 4 years.
Yep.
This one is the killer. I did show this on Plain America, but I'll show it to you guys in case you didn't see. I'll describe it for those who are listening. This is the net favorables amongst their own party. So I'll show you here, Dave. See that red line there? That's the GOP view of Trump.
Yep.
So as you can see, from the beginning of the year, Trump was at about 70% net favorables. So that's favorables minus unfavorables amongst the GOP. And you can see it's slowly going up as the year goes on. That's what's meant to happen. As they take the election more seriously, they tend to come on side. That happens to everyone during an election year.
Yep.
Look what's happening to Biden during this election year. His net favorables amongst Democrats is going down. And you can see the big drop-off after the debate.
Yes.
So that is the opposite of what should be happening. When you see that, what that tells you is that Biden is heading for a colossal blowout.
Yes. Because
that is a recipe for, like at the end there, Biden's got like 60% net favorables amongst Democrats. That means 20% of Democrats are going to stay home.
Yeah.
Like, and they don't need to vote for Trump. Just staying home equals blowout.
Yeah.
So that there is alarm bells, that graph. 5 siren alarm bells. And then finally, guess, according to YouGov, what percentage of voters approved of Biden's decision to quit?
It was 70%.
Yes, it was 71%, including 70% of Democrats.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a pretty good sign it was time to go.
Yes. And also a pretty good sign that it wasn't anything you could call undemocratic.
Yes. Well,
it was actually responding to the will of the people when you hadn't given them a choice the first time around.
When 65% of Democrats say it's time to go.
Yes.
And you haven't actually nominated them yet.
Yeah.
Responding is actually responding in a democratic way.
It is. There were no smoke-filled rooms going on here. Unless you describe the, I'm sure many WhatsApp groups that were frantically discussing this as smoke-filled rooms.
Or the steaming coming from Joe Biden.
It is true that, Democratic elites were pushing him. But first of all, it took them a very, very long time to do it compared to what people had been screaming for. That's a point so obvious that even Ezra Klein was able to make it. And second, it might not have actually been elite pressure that pushed him out anyway. As I said, the most convincing account I've seen is that he finally saw what the polls were actually saying, and there's been some discussion that his campaign was protecting him from the polls. I suppose there are going to be so many memoirs written about this, so I suppose the truth will come out at some point. But it was very telling, by the way, when J.D. Vance was talking about this, because he's really pushing this is undemocratic line.
Yep.
He said, because George Soros and Barack Obama decided. I'll let you draw your own conclusions about his precise choice of the people that he chose to mention there. Yeah. Especially given that it was quite obviously, people like Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah.
Who were
I'm not sure Soros had a lot to do with it.
Soros, no, of course. Yeah. George Soros, the globalist. Yeah. Yes.
It is also funny hearing all these. I might as well talk about the democracy thing there.
Yeah.
It is funny hearing all these Americans going on about, it's so undemocratic. Or like most of our listeners, I assume, are Australian. I think we got a fair few Americans these days.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, American viewers and American listeners, the Australian viewers and listeners to PEP are laughing at this categorization, because over in Australia and in the UK, we are very, very used to parties just nobbling leaders with abandon.
Yeah.
And the Democratic Party is not when you nominate when you nominate the candidate. The Democratic Party is when people choose which of the nominations they want.
Yes.
Which of the candidates they want. That's the Democratic part. It's only America that has this stupid system where you have people voting for the actual candidates.
Yeah.
And because, of course, the only people who vote in those primaries are the most extreme activist types.
Yeah.
That's not democracy.
No, and you could definitely argue, I mean, maybe not so much at the level of the presidency, but definitely at the level of Congress. You could argue that the primary process is creating more and more extreme members of Congress, because given that about 80% of them are usually in pretty safe re-election territory every 2 years, they're not concerned about being electable in the general sense. They're concerned about staving off a primary challenge either from the right or from the left. That's what the primaries are doing to Congress. There used to be a pretty powerful theory that it's still borne out in most cases that even despite presidential primaries, party elites decide, because they do so much vetting, effective vetting before the primaries even begin. Donald Trump was a major kind of anomaly to that theory, but it has often worked out. But even so, primaries they're not throwing up ideally democratic results.
No, and you're right, especially this primary.
Yeah,
where people had no real information about the major candidate, Joe Biden.
Nope.
And they had no options.
Yeah.
That's not a democratic system when you have no options and no information.
Yeah.
That's like a Russian style. That's an Iraqi style election under Saddam Hussein. That's what that is. That's just It's not that's not a world class democratic process. Also, by the way, how is it not democratic?
Yeah.
For the candidate to change their mind.
Yes.
No one held a gun to Joe Biden's head.
No.
He decided to change his mind. He didn't want to run.
Exactly.
That's acceptable.
Yeah.
That's okay. And yes, people tried to convince him very hard.
Yeah.
But they didn't use violence or anything. Like, they just made their case. That's called freedom of speech.
Yes.
Because they didn't do it in a smoke-filled room. As you said, they did it publicly.
Yes.
Like, what's wrong with that?
Yeah.
When people exercise their freedom of speech to try and convince you that you shouldn't be running, and then you agree with them.
No, there's nothing undemocratic about this. At all. By the way, we did discuss primaries and where they come from and why they're used now in PEP a couple of weeks ago. And, there were good reasons for why they were introduced in 1972 as basically the only means of selecting candidates. Before that, they'd just been a small part of the overall process. But it doesn't mean they're not some sacred writ, right? They were chosen in order to diffuse a certain social conflict that was going on in the United States at the moment. It doesn't mean they're always fit for purpose. When you have incumbent presidents, you do not have functional primary elections. We only need to go back to 2020 to remember when Republican primaries were actively getting cancelled.
Yes.
Yeah, so...
That's true. I forgot them.
Yeah.
I forgot those years.
Yeah, so, I mean, yeah, there's nothing sacred about the primaries.
Okay, so Joe Biden makes his announcement, takes everyone by
Yes.
surprise. 30 minutes before the announcement, campaign surrogates are still trying to lobby delegates for their vote. 8 minutes after the announcement, there are fundraising emails going out for Joe and Kamala still. Like, no one expected this. Well, those leaks from the press saying maybe, but the actual campaign itself did not expect
The campaign had no idea.
And within an hour, people who had been previously cursing out Joe Biden were talking about him like he was the new George Washington. He was the greatest of patriots. He was a hero to the working man.
Yeah.
It was a little bit sick making, but I mean, I do understand that people wanted to be nice to him because he was being nice, and also he did make the great sacrifice of dropping out on National Ice Cream Day, which must have been a huge sacrifice.
Oh,
for the
yes.
man.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, go on.
Okay, and I just want to note one thing about the process, which I also discussed with Dom Knight on the Chaser Report.
Yes.
Which is, this is the most consequential announcement of Joe Biden's entire political career.
Yes.
This is one of the most consequential political announcements ever, or at least in the last 50 years. The President of the United States chooses to make it on Twitter right at the time when Musk is really trying through an extraordinary run of events to rehabilitate Twitter as global town square. Right? He gets given the greatest free gift imaginable. President of the United States uses Twitter rather than any other channel of communication to announce he will not recontest the presidency. How does Elon Musk respond to this? By speculating that the message wasn't real. By speculating that someone had broken into his social media account and left a fake message. Basically, Elon Musk's reaction to the biggest announcement in the last 50 years being made on his social media platform is, you can't trust my social media platform. Someone might have broken in. That's why he's so good at running Twitter. That's why Twitter's just going from strength to strength.
Well, yeah, perversely, that was a very trustworthy reaction from Elon.
Yeah.
I mean, he's right. You can't trust it. So yeah.
He is absolutely right.
I mean, there is another angle as well on the Elon thing, which is, like Elon, for the first time ever that I'm aware of,
yes,
has spent the last week explicitly campaigning for a person.
Yes.
And that's not Joe Biden.
Yeah,
That's Trump. That's Joe Biden's opponent. And and then Joe Biden gave him a big free kick as a thank you. Which was a bit interesting.
That's just one more thing to mention before we move on. In campaign terms, how good the last 3 weeks had been for Trump. So basically, since he got shot, this is the only week I can ever remember where the media covered him and presented him basically as he would like to be covered and presented.
As he feels it should be all the time.
As he feels it should be all the time, putting him in this completely heroic light, just showering him with praise because of the fact that when it comes down to it, he survived a shooting and managed to turn it into an amazing photo op. Yeah, but I think what happened was, in the same way that Musk saw Trump get up from that and thought, he is going to be the president, time for me to immediately get on the bandwagon while there's still room, I think there were a lot of people in the media whose view was, well, he's definitely going to be president now. Let's start being nice to him. And the result of that was that it's not like there was no critical coverage of Trump over the last week, but nothing like what there usually is. And you also have to remember, media people are way more impressed than the average person by photo staging abilities, right? So for a lot of people in the media, the fact that Trump managed to turn a near fatal attempt on his life into the greatest photo of the campaign, admittedly impressive, but they saw that as the qualification to be president. Yeah. And I mean, there was, there was such a taboo for a little while on stating obvious things about Trump because, well, that's what led to him getting shot. I think it wasn't until details about the shooter actually started coming out that things just started to get back on a bit more of a normal footing, right? When I think that a lot of people would have been terrified that this shooter was, a devout MSNBC watcher or something like that, or had been reading their blog or something.
I reckon the Trump love actually went longer than that. Because people knew he was a Republican pretty early on.
Yeah.
I reckon the Trump love went all the way up to halfway through his convention speech.
Yeah.
I reckon there's a moment when the penny dropped and people said, "Oh, that's right, he's that guy."
Yes.
Isn't he?
Yeah. No, it is amazing.
Yeah, he's not Julius Caesar after all.
That's how long he managed to maintain the discipline for.
Yeah,
But we've also got to look at it from Trump's perspective. There was reporting saying he believed he'd been given an incredible gift, right? And he had. This might have been the first time in his life he actually started believing that God was real. No, God was real and is his employee. God is real and is working for Trump. So that's, I think, one of the things that led to some decisions which, in retrospect, may look a little bit politically shaky, like choosing J.D. Vance as his running mate. Yeah.
By the way, I also disagree with you politely about the mindset behind it. I don't think the media were going, he's going to be in charge now, so we better start sucking up to him because they had 4 years of Trump where they definitely were not sucking up to him. I reckon what it is and you need a long memory to remember this because a lot has happened in the last few years.
Yeah.
You'll remember this, but I don't know how many of the Peppers will. You need to go back 20 years or so to remember how much the media love an alpha male.
Yes.
They really...
That is very true.
They've really got daddy issues.
Yes.
They really do.
That is very true.
They're little sniveling bitches.
Yes.
And they really need daddy to smile upon them and pat them on the head and be big and strong.
Yeah.
And during the War on Terror, they were loving George Bush.
That's true.
When he could be the strong daddy.
Yes.
And Trump likes to act like that.
Yep.
But no one buys it. It's unconvincing.
That is very true,
It's extremely unconvincing. But for that moment,
Yes.
when he was like, I got shot and I don't care.
Yeah.
Just for that week, the media were going, hang on, he is daddy.
Yes.
He is my daddy. He does approve of me after all. Please, daddy, please. It was a bit like that. It was a bit pathetic.
Yeah.
And they were back to 2004 again.
Yes.
And that's what I think was going on.
Yeah.
I think that was the mentality. And I think you're right. That they were treating Trump exactly how he wants. In fact, I reckon for that one week, only for that 1 week, when a member of the media spoke to Trump, I bet they called him sir.
Sir, yes.
I bet they actually called him sir.
By the way, if you're a media worker and you're listening to this, obviously we're not talking about you.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
Of course not. Okay, but let's move on. Kamala Harris took over basically immediately.
Yes.
Like as soon as Biden was gone, she was in.
Yes.
She needed 1,976 delegates within 2 days.
Yep.
In fact, possibly 1 day, she had 2,400 delegates.
That's got to be a record.
Yeah. Now I should just say they're not bound. They can change their mind.
Yeah.
But assuming she hasn't
They're not
screwed anything
gonna.
up.
Yes.
Yeah. Then they'll stick with her.
Yep.
And she's received endorsements from pretty much every major person in the party, with the exception of Obama, who said, "We will be navigating uncharted waters in the days ahead, but I have extraordinary confidence that the leaders of our party will be able to create a process from which an outstanding nominee emerges." Now, I don't think it's a big deal that he said that.
No.
Do you think so?
No,
People
this
treating
is-
it like disapproval.
This is Obama being Obama.
Yes.
Like this is the most Obama response to anything. He never likes to be seen as anybody's cheerleader. doesn't particularly like to be seen as anybody's critic either. I think he sees himself as the great adult of the Democratic Party, and that, even as the party is enthusiastically endorsing a new leader, someone has to remain neutral and above it all. And I think that's what he sees himself as doing.
And I think he wants to not be kingmaker.
Yeah.
He knows he's a big voice.
Yes.
And if he endorses someone, it's over.
Yeah.
So he wants to not be that person.
Yes.
Which I think is fair enough.
Yeah, that is fair.
The Democrats also are persisting with their virtual roll call on August 7. They're going for. So that means Kamala Harris will be the official nominee in 2 weeks if she doesn't screw it up.
Yep.
So so it's happening very fast. She also this week has taken over the entire Biden campaign. All 1,300 staff are now her staff.
Yes.
She might make some changes. We'll see.
Yep.
So that's going to help her a lot because that was one of the biggest impediments for some other candidate.
Yes,
Building a campaign from the ground up. A lot of people are wondering, has she gotten the money? Has she gotten the Biden money? Not yet, she hasn't. There's about $100 million in the kitty. Most people are saying she will get her hands on that money after she becomes the official nominee.
Yes.
Some people are disputing it. I'm sure there'll be a court case from the Republicans. I don't think it matters because she's raising so much money so rapidly.
Yeah.
It's just $100 million. Who cares? Like she's raised she's raised $100 million of her own.
Yes.
And $150 million for a super PAC as well. So $250 million in 2 or 3 days isn't bad.
Yes.
It's anyway, so that's where she's at. What are your thoughts about how quickly she took over?
Okay, this is a very important part of the story.
Yeah.
Because Biden stepping aside, I think, had become inevitable. Maybe not then, but it had become inevitable. Yeah. Kamala Harris may or may not have been inevitable as the replacement. Kamala Harris becoming the replacement that quickly, that was definitely not inevitable.
Definitely not.
So that actually has to be explained why it happened.
Let's do that.
Okay.
So that versus an open contest.
Yes, yeah. Now, in some ways it's overdetermined. Okay, that is, there were so many things going for Kamala Harris. The endorsement of Biden, the fact that she's the vice president, the fact that people have been talking for weeks about if she is bypassed, then that's a massively disrespectful blow to the party's most loyal voters, which are black women. There's the fact that asking someone to build a campaign from scratch is a near impossible task, except if they're the vice president and can just inherit the entire campaign infrastructure and money. So, there was all of that. There was also the fact that she had a very good whipping operation in place that went to work immediately. So the nice stat that I saw cited was something like Biden had only made 20 phone calls in the last week. She made 100 phone calls in 10 hours. Now, it's not just about the fact that she was leaning on people and forcing them to make quick decisions. People getting those phone calls, that the fact that they could see how effective her whipping operation was, that would have been another factor that that greatly encouraged them. So she may not have been, she's not everybody's idea of an ideal candidate. And it's so easy to look at other candidates and imagine them being better candidates. To think, you've got 2 very popular swing state governors who could have locked down the Rust Belt.
Yep.
You've got 2 very popular southern governors who would have cleaned up among white independents. You've got a fucking astronaut.
Yes.
Who could beat an astronaut in an election? And yes, all of those things may be true, but the reality then is you've got that would give you a very fragmented field with everybody with different ideas about who the most obviously good pick is. And Harris still having decent credentials in that field, given that she was the only one who had, the only one who actually campaigned at that level and the only African-American and Asian-American in the field.
I can also make a very, very important point.
Yes.
The reason why Harris was always going to win, even in an open contest. who are the people voting?
Yes.
They're Biden delegates.
Yes, exactly.
They're people that Biden picked.
Yeah.
Biden endorsed Harris. And
Yes.
also, presumably these people have soft feelings for Kamala Harris
yeah.
because they're Biden fans.
Yes. So you put all of those things together and you've got what the great game theorist Thomas Schelling called a focal point. So focal points refer to coordination games when everybody knows that they need to arrive at a decision. Like everybody will benefit from arriving at a decision, but different people will benefit differently depending on the decision. The only way to solve that is if you've got a very obvious point around which people can coalesce, which means not only do you think this is the obvious point, but you think that everyone else will think this is the obvious point.
Yep.
Especially when that whipping operation went into effect, it was very clear that everyone looked around and said she is going to be the obvious choice, not just for me, but for everyone else.
Yep.
And, okay, so I've got to say, one of the things I enjoyed the most about this was that the New York Times and Washington Post and probably every other news organization had spent weeks preparing for an open competition.
Yes.
They all had these are the 10 candidates. Oh, which one's the best? Which one do you like the most? Like, take this quiz to see which candidate you are. Who's the best? That was destroyed in 3 hours. I absolutely loved it.
To be fair, they did just immediately change it to be, who's going to be the vice president?
that's-
Here are the 10 candidates.
That's true. Although I did love some of them made efforts to just run the stories anyway. The funniest one was the New York Times doing like, here's what our columnists have to say. And all of them are like, oh yeah, he'd be good, but he's already endorsed Harris. Yeah. There was a whole subgenre of articles saying, these are the 3 obvious choices. They have all endorsed Kamala Harris, though. So that was amazing. But that aside, obviously, what settled the race was the fact that every plausible candidate either endorsed Harris very quickly or their silence was telling. So I think the only one who didn't endorse her immediately was Gretchen Whitmer, but that Gretchen Whitmer had already said she wouldn't challenge Harris, and she was actually clearly pretty involved with the Harris campaign, basically from the opening moments of it. But yeah, it was just like you could see within a couple of hours. Like I think first was Gavin Newsom, second was Josh Shapiro. They all just fell into line so quickly that by about hour number 4, you had Marianne Williamson apparently lobbying to try to get 300 delegates. And, of course, with his always impeccable timing.
I know where this is going.
The New York Times announced that Joe Manchin is considering re-registering as a Democrat in order to contest the nomination. Joe Manchin weighing his options. Yes. So, like, it was, this was, I agree with you. It was inevitable she was going to be the candidate. Wasn't inevitable that she would do it so quickly.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
But I think, the whipping operation combined with the fact that everybody could see the same thing. Also, people just, as much as the idea of an open primary, obviously it appeals to the media because it would get so many eyeballs. Yeah, it appeals to donors. It appeals to people whose egos would be stroked by having some role in it. It was very clear that no one in the party had the stomach for it. We shouldn't also discount the fact that the Gretchen Whitmers and Josh Shapiros and Mark Kellys of the world might have thought this is going to be a very hard election to win.
Of course, they're young.
Yeah.
They can wait 4 years.
They can wait 8 years.
Yeah.
Quite happy to we'll sit this one out.
Yeah.
So in the end,
They can
over
wait
the term,
30 years, according to this election.
but but very, very important for her and for Democrats that it happened so quickly, because it meant on the same day that you have the shock of the announcement, by the end of the day, you had the exhilaration of, we've got a new candidate. The dishwasher is working again. Yes. Like, wow, mate, we'd forgotten what it looked like to have a fully functional human being as the face of the party.
Totally. Very good for morale. But I was also going to say, it also gives Kamala Harris an extra month.
Yes.
And she needs that month.
She does.
Like, it's too late.
Yes.
Every extra day they can get is better.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. Like, people at home, when they're listening to me talking about how Kamala Harris has taken over the campaign, I'm sure some of them would have thought, well, why can't Josh Shapiro take over the campaign? Why can't Gretchen Whitmer take over the campaign? They need jobs. Why don't they work for them? Here's the problem. If there was an open process that went all the way to the convention, which there would need to be for Josh Shapiro to take over the campaign, and if Kamala Harris wasn't decided until that in both cases, that campaign doesn't exist anymore.
No.
These people aren't going to sit around not getting paid for a month.
No.
Okay, so if someone doesn't take it over now, it falls apart.
Yes.
Yes, they'll be able to put bits of it back together in a month's time for sure.
Yeah.
But not all of it, and it'll just be that much harder, and you'll end up having to find some new vendor or some new property or some new this or that, and it won't be from the ground up.
Yeah.
But it'll be a pain in the ass nevertheless.
Yes.
Whereas now, Kamala Harris literally just takes over the campaign. Bang. She doesn't lose a single staff member unless she wants to.
Yeah.
So that's a huge advantage.
Yes. And like I am genuinely sympathetic to arguments that I know a lot of people made, a lot of my friends made, that it's worrying to have this without a deliberative process. But you've got to face the reality that it's 100 days to go. If Biden had done an LBJ and stepped aside in March, fine. But you could see the party was just not going to tolerate an open contest.
Yeah, there should have been a primary.
Yes, there should have been an actual primary.
Biden should have stepped aside last year when I told him to. And then Kamala Harris should have been president for 6 months, and she would sink or swim. If she was swimming, fine. No problems. But if she was sinking, then you have a real primary. That's what should have happened.
Yeah.
But anyway, and now it's too late. I mean, it's just too late.
Yes.
And by the way, also, I should point out just once again, as far as the democracy thing goes, the closest we can get at this point in time, because delegates choosing you isn't democratic either.
No.
It's a completely rigged contest, like I said, because Kamala Harris has a huge advantage over everyone else because they're Biden delegates, right? That's not a democracy either. The closest you get to a democracy right now, I'm afraid, is polling. It's the closest you can get.
That's true.
And when you look at the polling, well, it's pretty clear that they favour Kamala Harris. Like, I'm just trying to find here. Here's here. Morning Consult. This is after Biden dropped out. 65% of Democrat voters supported Harris to lead the party.
Yep.
This is before Biden dropped out?
Yep.
Quinnipiac?
Yes.
So this is before. Harris, 45%, Newsom, 12%, Buttigieg, 11%, Whitmer, 7%, Shapiro, Bashir, 4%, Kelly, 3%, Moore, Pritzker, and my mate Polis, 1%. That's the closest you get to democracy right now, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Like the people were choosing through their pollsters.
Yes.
So yeah, I think there was just no other options. And yes, I mean, I hate that there wasn't a primary, but it's too late. The damage has been done, not by this, but by many steps in the past.
Yeah.
So you might as well just not write off the election.
Yep.
Okay. So, the other thing is, I want to talk briefly about the impact that this has had on the Democrats, because this is also informing their decision making as well.
Yeah.
Just their euphoria at having Biden taken off their hands.
Yes.
Because it was beginning to look like there's a few reasons. First of all, it was beginning to look like there were no standards left in politics ever.
Yes.
Like you had Trump and Biden. People were just going, how are these two our picks? What is going on? This is completely dysfunctional. Nothing can change. I might as well give up.
Yes.
The whole thing is just a joke.
Yeah.
Democracy is a fool's paradise.
Yes.
I'm going to Russia. It was just a really, really dysfunctional situation. And the fact that people saying that enough made actual change, I think would have made people relieved.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the major themes of this year's election was this is the election that nobody wants.
Yeah.
This is the election we've somehow ended up with, but this is the election that no one is enthusiastic about except for Trump supporters. Yeah. So both parties were burdened with the most unpopular candidates in history. the Democrats were the only ones who had the option of changing their candidate. It is literally impossible for Republicans to change their candidate now because he's been chosen at the convention. But even before that, it would have been impossible not to have Trump as the candidate. Democrats actually had the ability to change candidates. It was their last, it was really their last card to play. The fact that they actually played it is a minor miracle.
Yeah, and also I think you shouldn't underestimate the amount of pain they have been going through. For the last month. At least, which would have been constant, especially having to decide whether to. Not only were they seeing their future just falling away in front of them, but on top of that, they did, every single day they had a decision to make of, am I going to destroy my own dignity to try and pretend that this isn't what everyone can see? And I'm not going to get anything for it anyway.
No.
I'm still going to lose. But every single day they had that choice to make. Today, am I going to destroy my dignity today? Yes, I am. Tomorrow, am I going to destroy my dignity? Yes, I am. I've got 4 months of that ahead of me. And then after that, we're going to get smashed anyway. Well, it's horrible for them. And actually, this goes to one of the correspondence we've got from Paul asking, could the size of the majority for next Republican Senate make an impact on the candidates they could get through? Susan Collins voted no for Barrett, Murkowski. She voted absent for Kavanaugh. If they only get a slim majority in the Senate, could Thomas Alito be actually replaced by someone less conservative? Yes. Yes, you're absolutely right. There are Susan Collins and Murkowski at least are moderates, genuine moderates. If the Democrats have 49 votes, seats in the Senate, it makes a massive difference to how much damage can be done with appointments. A massive difference. And the Democrats would have been kissing goodbye to 49 seats in the Senate. They would have been kissing goodbye to 45 seats. They would have been thinking to themselves, we have a decade out of the majority. And the House, they would have been smashed. It would have been horrible. Basically what just happened is the Democrats just had a near-death experience. And they just came back from the dead. And they have the euphoria of that feeling. The zeal of a second chance that they did not expect. And so they're just floating. And right now, they'd be transferring that love to Kamala Harris.
Absolutely.
Which is part of the reason why she won so easily. But also, they're going to raise a huge amount of money in the next few weeks. They're going to go up in the polls. They're going to have a great few weeks because they are so full of love because they just had a second chance at life. Now it might all turn to shit.
You might,
but we shouldn't underestimate the psychological effect.
And I think that all of this enthusiasm that you're seeing now, it's not sufficient to win an election, but it's necessary to win an election. Nothing could have generated that with Biden. Okay.
So before we move on to the next topic, all on this, but just the next little element, I just want to also note that I keep on saying it's just too late. I want to give props to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who had a really good Instagram live about all this. It went for about an hour. It's on YouTube. And she went through her thinking, and she made a couple of great points. And bear in mind, remember I told you the left-wing thing, right? Like AOC and Bernie Sanders were both, they were forming a vanguard around Joe Biden to try and protect the left.
Right? On the day that Trump got shot, the New York Times was running an op-ed by Bernie Sanders called Joe Biden for President.
I mean, Bernie Sanders, in his op-ed, and when he was talking about it, he was explicitly saying things like Joe Biden can't complete a sentence, but we should still vote for him. He was so damn with fake praise, but he was still defending him to the death because of policy, right? And AOC, she was very open about the fact that she distrusted other Democrats, saying the reason they're trying to get rid of Biden, they're also trying to get rid of Harris, because they want to replace him with the conservative. And so she was very neurotic about that, and I think rightly so. But I thought she made 2 excellent points, which I want to share with you guys, about why waiting for an open ballot at the convention was a huge mistake. This was argument number 1.
People think this election is in November. The convention is in 4 weeks, and early ballots go out. The first early ballots in this country go out 4 weeks after that. This election is not in November. It's in September. It's in the end of September. It's in early October. And so we're almost in August.
That is a great point that doesn't get made enough.
No.
If they were starting from scratch, whoever this open candidate was from the convention, they got like 3 weeks until people are voting.
Yeah.
It's too late.
Yes.
It's just too late. So that was her first point. And the second point, which I thought was also excellent, was this one here.
I have not seen the plan. And when a convention is in 4-ish weeks, when Michigan has to finalize their ballot 2 days after the convention concludes, which, mind you, you have an open convention. The convention could then go on for days if you have a bunch of nominees. And then before you know it, you blow past the Michigan deadline if you don't have a nominee in 2 days or whenever it may be. And then the legal problems start to mount.
That is an excellent point.
Yes.
It is negligence. The beginner process you can't guarantee will finish before the Michigan deadline.
Yes.
Because the election is over if you miss Michigan.
Yes.
So that was a great point from her as well. And by the way, as you would recall, I was not a fan of AOC when she debuted.
No, I know you weren't.
I was not a fan at all. But I think every year she's developing better and better. I think she's a real learner.
Yes.
And I think she's becoming already one of the wiser heads in the Democratic Party. I have
Yeah.
to say. And I wouldn't be surprised. I've kind of turned a bit here, but I wouldn't be surprised if you add another 20 years to her, you might get another Pelosi.
Yeah.
Like, I think she's a real learner.
Yeah.
And she just keeps getting smarter and smarter, and I think that's and she's obviously a hard worker as well.
Yes.
So and she cares about the fact that she holds these Instagram live things, not just when she first came to Congress.
Yeah.
But now.
Yes.
6 years later.
Yeah.
She doesn't have to do that.
No.
She's going to win an election anyway.
Yeah.
She does it because she cares. So good on her. Now, it's, a correspondence here from Back5. Can you explain AOC's comments on legal challenges? If there's a potential issue with changing candidate on ballots, then why are the convention so late? Or is this ballot date just partisan state shenanigans that will only end if RNC/DNC held in the same week? Okay. Conventions used to be as late as possible because of campaign finance reasons.
Yes.
Because if you took public financing, which used to be a thing, grandkids gather around. There was a time when they took public financing. You're allowed to spend and fundraise as much as you liked until the convention, and then after that, you had to just take the money from the government. And that was it. That was if you did public financing, but so they used to push the convention as late as possible, so they could spend and raise as much money as they possibly could while still taking money from the government to pay for their campaign. That was the theory. But then Obama came along with his small donors and just blew public financing out of the water.
Yeah, that's right. McCain is the last major candidate who was quite dependent on public financing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like, ironically, given that Obama was at least rhetorically all about public financing.
Yes, yeah.
He's the guy who killed public financing. So that, and since then, as Dave just said, there hasn't been another candidate. And so public financing doesn't matter anymore because no one takes it, which means there's no reason. They don't even need a convention. They can have it. They could just have their roll call and that's it. They could hold the convention whenever they want. It doesn't matter. It's just tradition now. So the reason why they're late is just because they're just when they used to be. It's as simple as that. Do you have any other thoughts on that? No. Okay. All right. All right. So, there's one more question about the process I should ask you. Should they have Mitt Romney? Should Mitt Romney be the nominee? Dave? Should Mitt Romney be the nominee of the Democrat Party? I'm referring to Aaron Sorkin's op-ed.
Was this the most brilliant act of self-parody ever?
Aaron Sorkin, the writer of The West Wing, thinks or thought, to be fair, as soon as Biden went, he was like, oh, no, I changed my mind. Let's go for Harris.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Let me find the exact quote, which has been so good. Yeah.
There's a quote about Mitt Romney being the Democratic nominee. Mitt Romney, who you might not realize is pro-life.
Yes.
Being a Democratic nominee. What's the quote, Dave?
Okay, but bearing in mind, the title of this op is How I Would Script This Moment for Biden and the Democrats.
Of course
okay, so if this was actually a season of the West Wing, this is what would happen. Does Mr. Romney support abortion rights? No. Does he want to aggressively raise the minimum wage, bolster public education, strengthen unions, expand transgender rights, and enact progressive tax reform? Probably not. But you don't even need to read what's after but. Like, does he support anything that the Democratic Party supports? No. But
Yep.
yeah, like that. I think people fail to appreciate this is only a couple of degrees away from saying that they should have nominated Mike Pence.
Yeah. Yes.
And I would say it's less than 5 degrees away from saying the Democrats should have nominated Donald Trump. Oh. Like, that would be the masterstroke.
It would.
Because you denied the Republicans a victory for Trump because instead it becomes a victory for the Democratic Party. You get bipartisan healing.
It's brilliant. That's what I'd write.
Yeah.
In my shit movie.
Yes.
In my movie entitled The Worst Political Movie of All Time.
Yeah, this is another, like, he got this out like immediately after Biden's announcement.
Yeah. I'm going to engage with it seriously for just 1 second.
Really?
Well, not super seriously, but just
yes.
I just want to explain why.
Yeah.
Apart from just being, this is so stupid. Because you might be like, just explain why exactly it's so stupid. I'll tell you why. It's all very well to say, if you really care about democracy, you'll vote for anyone who supports democracy. And you'll vote for the person who's most likely to win, independents and Republicans who care about democracy. And that's Mitt Romney. I can see the logic, right? But here's the problem. Not everyone cares about democracy.
No.
And some people vote for other reasons. Yes, you might care about democracy more than anything, but some people might care about abortion more than anything.
Yeah.
Or might care about taxes more than anything.
Yes.
Or might care about climate change more than anything.
Yeah.
And those people ain't going to vote for Mitt Romney. And if you don't get everyone voting for Mitt Romney, then you're going to lose.
I would actually suggest that would be a recipe for Donald Trump to win more than 400 electoral college votes.
I think you're right.
Yes, yeah.
But my favourite self-serving suggestion, by the way, when we're talking about these kinds of suggestions, was from RFK. Did you see RFK's suggestion? He had a scheme.
Oh, yeah. I know he...
I read you his quote.
Yeah.
I read his quote. I call on the Democratic Party to return to its traditional commitment to democracy and exemplify it with an open process. You go, okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Democracy, open process. Yeah, I mean, we explain why that's a bad idea, but fair enough. You can't begrudge that. So, you think he's trying to vote at the convention, the open process. No, that's not what he means. Instead of anointing a candidate handpicked by DNC elites, he said, the party should use neutral polling to identify the candidate who can best beat Donald Trump. The delegates should then select a nominee based on this information. So, to be clear, he doesn't want votes, which he knows he won't win. He doesn't want a commitment to democracy to be honoured with polling based on who Democrats want.
No.
No, because he knows he won't win that either.
No.
What he wants is the commitment to democracy to be honoured with polling based on who can beat Trump. Because he thinks maybe he can win
his
those
famously
polls.
Neutral polls.
Yes. Remember, we've seen those polls before.
Yes.
And they rely on him winning lots of Republican votes.
Yes.
Essentially. People who wouldn't vote for him in an actual election. So that's his, that's kind of pathetic RFK. It's a nice try, mate. And I should say that, of course, is That was like days after he tried to trade an endorsement for the Trump campaign
Yes.
in return for a job in the Trump administration.
Yeah.
So what a worm, a brain worm, if you will.
Yep.
But,
Secretary of After Midnight Calls to Babysitters.
yes.
Yeah.
Dave, let's give the people a little break, a toilet break, if you were. This was an ad on Fox News, which I hope you enjoy.
This $2 bill features President Trump's mugshot. Donald J. Trump makes history once again by becoming the first former president of the United States to ever be criminally indicted. The powers that be have made good on their threats to get him by indicting him 4 times. He says he will never surrender. Whether or not you are a supporter of the 45th president, there's no doubting the historic importance of this photo. That's why National Collectors Mint has taken crisp, uncirculated U.S. legal tender $2 bills direct from sealed treasury packs, then enhanced them to commemorate this event. The mugshot seen round the world is front and center in the portrait oval, flanked by images of the flag and President Trump's famous signature. His inmate number is inscribed below the photo, and his declaration, "Never Surrender," is boldly presented on the bill. The final issue price was to be set at $39. However, during this special release, this full-color commemorative $2 bill can be yours for only $19.95.
Back from the toilet break, which Dave didn't see. You should watch that on the podcast.
Okay.
It's pretty funny.
Yep.
Let's talk about Harris's polling so far. Harris versus Trump.
Yep.
Do you have anything to say about that? Or do you want me to just get right into it?
So I've seen a few polls now. The best one I saw for Harris was a Reuters Ipsos poll, which, I mean, in general, that's been one of the better ones for Biden. So that had, I think, on the day that Biden pulled out, so before Harris was the candidate, that had Harris and Trump tied on 44.
Yep.
Now has Harris leading Trump 46-44.
That's right. Yep.
There was a CNN poll that had this had been one of the big ones that had Trump leading Biden 49-43. That now has Trump leading Harris 49-46.
Yep.
Those are the only two that I've seen that were entirely fielded post Harris clearly locking the nomination up. What else have you got?
Okay, I got a few things. First of all, I want to start with Harris and Biden comparisons before he dropped out. NBC found the averages of all post-debate major polls.
Yes.
Were Trump 47-45 over Biden, Trump 47-46 over Harris.
Yep.
So, yeah, basically the same. 538 ran their own averages. They found Biden trailed Trump over the last month by 3. Harris trailed Trump over the last month by 4.5. The graph was interesting, though. It's a really interesting spread. I'll just show you this. Here we go. So the orange there is before the debate.
Yep.
The blue is after the debate. What you're looking at there is the margins between the difference in margins between Trump Biden and Trump Harris.
Yep.
So you can see the orange before the debate. Harris was basically about 4 points worse off than Biden at like the mode, the measure which there was the most of.
Yeah.
But you can see the spread was much closer together.
Yeah.
It kind of tailed off a bit at the end there.
Yeah.
Like she had quite a few really bad polls, but she didn't have too many good polls.
No.
Whereas now,
Yes.
there's a lot more good polls.
Yes. Yep.
And the mode is now 0. She's basically with Biden.
Yep.
But there are a lot more polls where she's doing a lot better than Biden.
Yes.
So you can see this. You can see the spread beginning to occur in her favor.
Yes.
So that was what 538 did. But look, basically, most of the polls at the moment, she's still polling like a generic candidate.
Yes. Yeah.
Like where every candidate, including Al Gore in one poll, is tested up against Trump. And essentially, Trump in all of them gets basically 47 in a two-way vote, head-to-head vote. And when there's a 5-party race, he gets 42.
Yes. Yeah.
And he's usually either about the same as them or slightly ahead.
Yes.
That could obviously change for better or worse. But I also want to make a point about how much of a mess polls are at the moment. You really shouldn't trust them yet.
No.
Quinnipiac had Trump leading Harris 49-47, okay? So it's just 2 points. Harris pretty close.
Yes.
But Harris was down amongst 18 to 34s in that same poll by 19 points to Trump.
Yeah.
So getting smashed amongst the youth
Yeah.
when it's pretty close to a tie.
Yeah.
Harris X poll, ironically, had Trump smashing Harris 50 to 41, and they were basically tied on the youth, 46 to 44.
Yeah.
So, which is the opposite. So
Yeah.
that makes no sense
No,
at all.
it's going to take a while.
It is going to take a
for
while.
these to shake out. The only thing that I trust about the polls at the moment are those showing some pretty dramatic drops in the Kennedy vote.
Yes,
Yeah.
I trust that as well.
Yes.
Remember, the more that goes on
Yeah.
with the major party candidates, the less people are interested.
Yes,
in
yeah.
the-
So
in
I've seen
the-
Kennedy's vote down at 5%, 2%, yeah, which I think is where it's destined to go.
There are three nuggets which I drew out, which I think are worth mentioning.
Yeah.
In the NBC, amongst the quarter of Republican voters who are unsatisfied with Trump,
Yep.
Trump led Biden 63 to 17, but he led Harris 73 to 16.
Yep.
Which suggested that she was less appealing to disaffected Republicans.
Yes. Yeah.
I can believe that.
Yep, I can believe it.
But in the same poll,
Yep.
third-party candidates,
Yes.
third-party candidate supporters,
Yep.
favoured Trump 32 to Biden 31, but they favoured Harris 46 to Trump 39.
Yeah.
So she might be more appealing to the double haters, which also makes sense.
Yes. Yeah,
because
yeah.
they particularly hate Trump and Biden, so some of them will be more open to,
Yes.
to Harris.
One of the reasons why the polls are going to be such a mess is because the electorate will change with this.
Yes, it will.
There are going to be people who drop out. So,
Yeah.
like I do, I'm sure Biden has supporters, especially among older white voters who aren't going to vote for Harris, probably won't vote for Trump either. But Harris actually has a chance to get younger voters, minority voters. So the electorate is going to change.
Yes.
As I'm not saying that means Harris is going to win, but you're definitely going to get a slightly different group of people voting on election day from what you would have got in a Trump-Biden contest.
Talking about which, I don't
Yes.
have a number in front of me. I've got it vaguely in my head though.
Yeah.
A bit of an approximation here.
Yeah.
YouGov had a really interesting poll recently where
Yeah.
they asked people whether they were likely to vote
Yeah.
in the case of a Biden-Trump election
Yeah.
and in the case of a Harris-Trump election.
Yeah.
And what they found was that we're talking turnout here, right?
Yes.
The turnout of white people didn't change at all. The turnout of various ages barely changed. Like it was 1 or 2 points here or
Yeah.
there. The only demographic that changed was black people. There's I think from memory it was 7% more turnout
Yeah.
with Harris Trump than Biden Trump. And if you recall what I was saying about what the professional pollsters, the private pollsters were telling us
Yes.
on Planet America, when we interviewed, there was a guy we interviewed who's a private pollster for just black people.
Yes.
And what he told us was black people are not going to vote for Trump. There's no interest amongst black people for Trump, but they're going to stay home.
Yeah.
And at least that YouGov poll would suggest a lot fewer of them would stay home
Yes.
with Harris. So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
goes to what you're saying about the electorate actually changing.
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, I think it's impossible to tell at this point how the election is going to go. I'd say Trump starts as the favourite.
Yep.
But I am reasonably certain Harris is going to do better than Biden would have done.
Yeah.
I just can't see how things could have got any better for Biden.
Let me ask you, how do the Democrats want to run this election campaign? What changes are they going to make because of Kamala Harris?
Well, now they can actually make a positive case for themselves.
Yep.
I think.
Yep.
That's one. They can make a far more strenuous case on abortion.
Yep.
This was one of the reasons why Biden was looking so weak. In that debate, when he couldn't even mention the word abortion, when he was asked about abortion, the Democrats' strongest issue, and answered a different question. So
He brought up immigration.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So not taking it to them on the single biggest issue.
Yeah.
I think it's just unfathomable. I honestly don't know how well the prosecutor versus felon thing is going to go.
They're certainly trying it.
Yeah, they are certainly trying it. I've got no idea how well that's actually going to go. But there are definite, Harris is someone who is actually generating genuine enthusiasm about herself. So she can actually campaign positively as herself. That's something that it was very, very hard for Biden to do. They will be, they'll be able to do this thing, which is probably not very honest, but of basically being able to emphasize the popular aspects of Biden's administration while ignoring the less popular aspects. And by the way, on the point that she's going to get hammered on, which is immigration.
Yeah.
She was not in charge of immigration. She was not in charge of the border. She was given the impossible task of trying to sort out the problems in the Central American countries that were causing so many asylum seekers to go to the United States. Yeah. And she was given no resources to do it and didn't even really seriously have the backing of the Biden administration to do it. So she was given a completely impossible task there.
Look, I was going to get into that later, but I'll get into it now. Before I do, I just want to play a clip about the prosecutor felon thing, just to show what she's doing. I'll deal with this, then I'll take your borders out. Okay? All right, so Harris, straight out of the bat, the first things she said as the de facto nominee of the presumptive nominee of the Democrats was this.
You know, as many of you know, before I was elected as vice president, before I was elected as United States Senator, I was the elected Attorney General, as I've mentioned, of California, and before that I was a courtroom prosecutor. In those roles, I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women, fraudsters who ripped off consumers, cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
Okay, you can see she's pretty comfortable in that.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you how you know that she wants to run that line.
Yeah.
That was her line in 2019.
It was, yes.
This was her first ad that she ran in 2019, right at the beginning.
Sick of this? Well, think about this. He's a world leader in temper tantrums. She never loses her cool. She prosecuted sex predators. He is one.
Grab him by the...
She shut down for-profit colleges that swindled Americans. He was a for-profit college.
At Trump University, we teach success.
Literally. He's owned by the big banks. She's the attorney general who beat the biggest banks in America and forced them to pay homeowners $18 billion. He's tearing us apart. She'll bring us together. This is Trump. And in every possible way, this is the anti-Trump. So if that's what you're looking for in your next president, there's really only one. Kamala.
That ad resurfaced so quickly that one radio station that I spoke to thought that it had been an ad that had just been produced, which took me by surprise because I hadn't seen it at that point. But anyway. Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about the border czar thing.
Yes.
You're absolutely right that she wasn't the... I mean, Biden has literally never called her the border czar.
No.
That is a media creation.
Yes.
That phrase, the border czar. Now, people would be hearing that and going, yeah, who cares what he called her? Like, her job was to fix the border, wasn't it? Like, Dave's dancing around it with all this Central America crap. Look, I'll tell you what. There is one way that we can be... Okay, well, actually, first thing I'll tell you is if you go back to the period in question and you look up the news articles, they're all saying that she's in charge of the border. That's what they're saying at the time. Like for instance, this is AP, 24th of March, 2021. President Joe Biden has tapped Vice President Kamala Harris to lead the White House effort to tackle the migration challenge at the U.S. southern border. And work with Central American nations to address root causes of the problem. So they talk about the root causes thing.
Yeah.
But they also say she's in charge of the border.
No.
But
There's a guy whose literal job that was.
Yes.
Republicans impeached him, remember?
Yes. Alexander Mayorkas, yes. But it's a very simple way to determine who's telling the truth here.
Yep.
Just look at what Joe Biden said.
Okay.
Because there wasn't a document. There's not like this was like a law or something.
Yeah.
This is all based on one press conference.
Okay.
And I've got the quote.
Does it involve
right
a coherent sentence?
It does.
Okay.
Just for once.
But I've asked her, the VP today, because she's the most qualified person to do it, to lead our efforts with Mexico and the Northern Triangle and the countries that help. We're going to need help in stemming the movement of so many folks stemming the migration to our southern border.
Okay, I just realized as soon as I hit play, actually he's wearing a mask. So maybe it wasn't a coherent sense, but you can clearly see that Dave is right.
Yes.
that was his actual announcement I just played to you. Okay.
Yeah.
There was never she's in charge of the border. It was always she's here to help with Mexico and Central America and those countries. And so, yeah. So
and how are they going to do it? By reforming US drug policy? No, by serious economic aid? I don't know what the plan, like she was given nothing to do this impossible job.
Well, in the end, Biden did it by making an agreement with Mexico with a couple of months to go.
Yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
I would also just like to say something in general about Harris and her very low profile as vice president. Okay, now, in the same way that I don't speak for the US Study Centre at the University of Sydney, I'm certainly not speaking for Kamala Harris here, okay? Yeah. I'm not a member of the K-Hive. All I'll say is the dishwasher is working again.
Yes.
Okay, she had the lowest profile of any vice president of my lifetime, which in my memory, that goes back to George H.W. Bush as Reagan's vice president. She had a lower profile than Dan Quayle, lower profile than Biden himself had as vice president. Now, part of that was she couldn't travel around the country very much because she had to be in Washington all the time to cast tie-breaking votes. She holds the record for the number of tie-breaking votes cast with 33.
Yep.
That's more than a tenth of all tie-breaking votes cast in history. All the next 10 are all people from the 18th and 19th century. You've got to go back to Mike Pence as someone close in time, and he had 13. Right, so she was stuck in Washington all the time, but that's not the real reason she had a low profile. The real reason she has a low profile is everyone in the Biden administration except Biden has a low profile. Now, it's very unusual in foreign policy to have absolutely nobody who's a kind of independent or alternative or even distinctive voice. Every other administration, even Trump's, you had people like John Bolton and Mike Pompeo, who maybe you remember them for the wrong reasons, but you remember them. In Barack Obama's administration, you had people like Susan Rice and John Kerry and Hillary Clinton, right? People who other people would actually be able to name in a trivia contest.
Yeah.
George W. Bush, of course, had Dick Cheney, Don Rumsfeld, Colin Powell, even people who weren't cabinet secretaries like Paul Wolfowitz were like Kissinger-level celebrities during the Iraq War. And, you know, with Clinton, everyone remembers Madeleine Albright and Warren Christopher. George H.W. Bush had James Baker and Cap Weinberg. I mean, it is a normal feature of presidential administrations that you have quite powerful figures in foreign policy who actually seem to contribute their own ideas to foreign policy, who are certainly effective spokespeople, with someone other than the president who is a recognizably acting figure. You did not have that in the Biden administration at all, right? You're going to do very well in a few years' time at pub trivia to be able to name Anthony Blinken or Jake Sullivan. Yes. Joe Biden, as we've seen at the moment, can't name Lloyd Austin, right?
Yes.
And as I think I've said before, I think this was a result of Biden's own very frustrating experiences as vice president, constantly getting overridden, despite the fact he felt he had a lot more pertinent experience than anyone else in the room. He was the one who didn't want the Afghanistan surge. The Afghanistan surge happened anyway, and that occupation dragged on for another 10 years until he ended it in what is now widely regarded as the lowest point of his presidency. He did not want to be overridden or outshone by anyone. So he surrounded himself with mediocrities and gave very low-profile positions to people who might not have been, like Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
Now, a good sort of shorthand for this is, think of a president. If the most prominent cabinet member that you can remember from that presidency is the Attorney General, that hasn't been a very successful presidency. And that's Biden. It's Merrick Garland. Yeah. I sincerely believe for presidents to succeed, they actually, the presidency is too big a job for anybody to actually do. They actually need to have effective people around them. And Biden has not. And that's one of the reasons why this is going to be remembered as a noble but ineffective presidency.
I reckon it's a good call. I think you're right about the fact that Kamala Harris was given a situation where she had to be low key.
Yeah, I'll make I'll make one exception to this. There's one very obvious cabinet minister or cabinet secretary who is a distinctive voice, and that's Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah.
But he's the transport secretary.
Yeah,
yeah,
and they use him not as necessarily the transport
no,
secretary,
no,
but as their spokesperson.
Yeah, you'll
Fox
occasionally
News.
hear him talking about trains and planes, but Buttigieg he's the Fox News attack dog.
Yeah, he's the ambassador for Fox News.
Yeah.
But I did make one other point though about the border czar thing, which is that before I think I conclusively showed you that the news was not reporting what Joe Biden was announcing.
Yes.
But did they push back?
No.
No, they didn't.
Yeah.
They just accepted it.
Yeah.
It's Joe Biden's fault.
It is.
That Kamala Harris has this bullshit border czar thing hanging over her head.
Yep.
Because there's no point accepting it for 2 years and then turning around and going, well, actually, that's not true. That's too late then. If you want to challenge it, you need to challenge it straight away.
Yes.
And they didn't. And so I think Kamala Harris has Joe Biden to thank for this cloud hanging over us.
Yes.
I was just going to say, just go back a little bit further when I was asking you about the kind of campaign they want to run, and you answered it. I would actually, it's not necessarily a contradiction to you. It's just an addition. I think what they want to do, as much as possible, and they can. They have this rare opportunity to do it. Is to run Kamala Harris as a generic Democrat. Because she's not in charge of anything.
Yeah.
She doesn't need to do anything. It's a real sweet spot.
Yes.
She's not the president.
Yeah.
She can take credit for whatever parts of this administration she wants to take credit for. She can distance herself from whichever part she wants to distance herself from. She doesn't need to do anything.
Yeah.
She doesn't need to talk about anything she doesn't want to talk about. She can be just the generic Democrat.
Generic D.
And they do real well in polls.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
She can spend all day and all night campaigning on the exact issues she wants to campaign on and ignore the rest.
Yes.
She doesn't have to weigh in. And what that would do, if she did that, is she'd make Trump the issue again, which is the most important thing. George Conway actually made this point extremely well. I'll try and whip up his quote. Here we go.
I've always thought this election was relatively simple. 2016, Trump won because Hillary became the issue. Somehow they got Trump to read off a teleprompter for a few weeks at the end. 2020, Trump was the incumbent. He was the issue because of his behavior, because of Clorox, because of everything. And what happens again this year is whoever becomes the issue loses. And the problem that we were having over the last 3 or 4 weeks was that Joe Biden was becoming the issue when Donald Trump has to be the issue. And now Donald Trump isn't going to be able to avoid being the issue.
I reckon that's absolutely spot on.
Yep.
They just need to make Trump the issue again. Use the power of negative polarization.
Yes.
Like that's the most powerful force in America today.
Yep.
So I think George is right that Conway's right that Biden's been the issue for the last month, and he was going to be the issue for the next 4 months.
He was,
which is why he had to go.
Absolutely.
And so they might as well take advantage of that. And Kamala Harris is in a position where she can.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about her strengths then. The Kamala Harris strengths, then we'll talk about the weaknesses.
Yep.
We've already started on the weaknesses a little bit.
Yes.
With the borders are. Okay, what do you think her strengths are? And her opportunities. Her strengths and her opportunities from here.
She's expected to still be alive in 4 years' time.
That is a massive strength compared to Biden.
Yes.
I'm not sure it's a strength compared to Trump. I think people are expecting him to live for 4 more years.
She speaks in complete and coherent sentences.
That's an advantage over, over Trump.
It's spoken in known human languages. Okay, no, but she is... so we saw, like, her greatest moment in the 2020 campaign was her debate against Biden.
Yes.
Yeah. So we saw her real sharpness then. And we saw that she can deliver these pretty brutal lines in a very relaxed way. She doesn't, the whole thing about her not losing her cool, like this is a very well practiced technique of hers. She doesn't get overheated when she's doing this stuff. So sort of presentationally, because she does need to go on the attack, because as you say, they need to make it about Trump.
Yep.
She is going to be able to do that effectively. Substantially, the fact that she has been the party's de facto leader on abortion for a while now, she's got the cred of, first leader to visit an abortion clinic.
Yep.
First gentleman vice president was out at an abortion clinic in Washington the day after she clinched the nomination. So she's pretty much got that issue down pat. Even though she's not every young African American's ideal candidate. A lot of people, especially on the minority left, don't like her record. They don't like the prosecutor persona.
Yeah.
Although in the Senate, when you actually look at the ratings of her, more liberal than Sanders, right?
Most liberal.
Yeah.
Literally the most liberal person in the Senate. I mean, she was running for president at that point.
She was. Yes.
So.
Yeah. And I mean, she was in this awkward position in 2020 where she was running from the left but couldn't escape criticisms from the left because of the prosecutor thing. And when the left already had its standard bearer in Bernie Sanders and its backup standard bearer in Elizabeth Warren, she really didn't have a place in that contest at all.
Yeah, and she was. It was hard for her the primary.
Yeah.
The primary in 2020 because she was trying to move to the left. As you said, she was.
Yeah, but to complete the point that I was making, she's probably more than any other candidate in the hypothetical field. She probably has the ability to reach younger African American, Asian American, and Latino voters. And that, I think, is a huge strength in the context of this race. It's not enough to win her the election. She's still got to do very well with other groups. But once again, that was a group that Biden seemed to have so much trouble with, so much trouble motivating. She is not going to have that kind of trouble.
No.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why in a second. The first thing I would say that you haven't mentioned is that she can read an auto cue.
Yes,
and honestly, it sounds like I'm being a smart ass, but I'm not.
Yeah.
The fact that Biden could not read an auto cue.
50.
Yes.
5.
I mean, towards it, he literally couldn't read it. But even before then, he was just a terrible auto cue reader. Like he couldn't understand him. Like it's funny, and I'm playing in America. There'll be times, like for instance, just this week. This is such a sign. I played a grab from him where, in my view, he was saying that Secret Service director was a him. That he didn't know the Secret Service director was a woman. But some of the commenters in response said, no, he's not saying him, he's saying them. And I'm going, you know what? You can't bloody tell with him Because he doesn't enunciate. You can't understand a damn thing he's saying.
That's like when I thought he said that the United States is the central country of the world.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
That was particularly poor from him.
Yeah. What he was supposedly saying was indispensable.
Indispensable rather than central. Yeah.
Look, there's one syllable that's sort of accurate.
But the point is that the Democrats have been not able to fight back.
No.
They've just been on defense. They haven't been able to attack for this entire campaign because Biden was incapable of it.
Yeah.
And they've finally got someone who can construct some arguments, even if it's just on the audio cue in front of her.
Yes.
And fight back in sound bites, which is the way elections are conducted. She can finally got someone who can deliver a sound bite.
Yes.
Think about every time Joe Biden made a video, there was 50 cuts per minute. Cut. Because they just couldn't get him to just read a sentence.
Yeah.
And so that is over. So that's the first advantage.
Yes.
That's a big advantage.
Yes.
I think that's going to change a lot, being able to fight back. Like Trump has gotten away with so much because they couldn't expose it.
Yeah.
That ends. The next thing is the question of the age card.
Yes.
All right, because obviously, recall Nikki Haley saying the first pay to retire its 80-year-old candidate is going to be the one who wins the election. The Dems they're already trying this.
Yeah.
This is the hack Bakari Sellers the other day.
Right now, Kamala Harris has her work cut out for her. She's running against the oldest nominee for president of the United States in American history. And so when you have this type of change election, when you have this type of generational divide that you have, it's a question of whether or not you want to go backwards with Donald Trump or forward with Kamala Harris. I mean, the man is nearly 80 years old. And so the question is, can he serve another 4 years? I'm not sure he can.
The cheek of Bakari Sellers to be running this line within a week of Biden going. I mean, honestly. And when I call him the hack, I want to tell you why.
Yep.
Bakari Sellers, of all the spokespeople,
Yes.
is the one who tells you exactly what the Democrats want you to hear.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I got proof of that. The proof is the day after the first debate, when everyone was like going, what the hell are we supposed to, how do we deal with this? Bakari Sellers literally started talking directly through the camera to the Biden campaign team. And this is what he said.
He had a poor debate performance last night. He didn't look good. I wish the campaign would have told us that he was sick so I could at least lay a little groundwork throughout the day. You know, when we're on the air, this is to everybody on the campaign. Let us know if the man has a cough. You know that before he walks on stage so we can actually relay that to the public and message appropriately.
He openly says to the campaign, please just tell me what to say so I can spin it for you. Like, I just couldn't believe it. So he is indeed the consummate hack.
Yeah.
And so when he's saying that, when he's giving that shameless grab about age, you know that's coming from the campaign. That's what they want.
Yes.
So they're going to try and play the age card. In my view, do you think it will work?
I have my doubts that it will work.
Yep.
Because the picture of him surviving the shooting, the video of him surviving the shooting, especially when it's abbreviated as it usually is to make it look like he pops up like a jack in the box.
Yeah.
That I think is going to leave a pretty indelible impression.
Yeah, I agree.
As much as I was criticizing the media earlier for the way that they treated that, I think it makes it, when people see that happening, they don't have concerns about his physical infirmity.
Yeah.
I think they should, but I don't think that they're gonna.
I agree. I think that if there was any chance of running the age campaign, it disappeared as soon as Trump took the bullet and started doing fight.
Something to point out about the polling after the shooting is that all the polling that I saw that had really good sort of directly comparable almost immediately before and immediately after, there wasn't much of it, but there were a couple of polls. What both of them showed was actually not Trump gaining, it was Biden declining.
Yeah.
After that, because the comparison just became so obvious at that point.
I completely agree. Biden looked 100 years older than Trump.
Yeah.
It was a Biden point. But Harris isn't going to say he's too old anyway. What she's going to say is she's going to say change.
Yes.
A lot.
Yeah.
She'll say change 1,000 times.
Yeah.
That'll be the code word, I reckon.
Yeah.
But on that note, like contrasting physically,
yes,
Harris from Trump, there's a real unexpected opportunity for her here, which I never would have guessed in a million years. You're going to have to explain it to me, Dave.
Okay.
Someone's going to have to explain it to me because I don't get it.
Yeah.
Which is how and why Kamala Harris has suddenly become a viral sensation. I do not get this at all. She's become meme gold. My daughter is obsessed with Kamala Harris.
There you
because
go.
of the memes, right? She's a 14-year-old. She's on TikTok, and it's just filled with Kamala Harris doing stupid shit, and people are loving it. They're loving it. And the fact is, for the last 4 years, it's been people going, "Oh my God, Kamala Harris is singing the wheels on the bus," you know, like this one here.
Wheels on the bus go round and round.
That to me, that's awkward and awful.
Was that just after she had explained busing to Joe Biden?
She seemed a lot happier than she did when she was talking about busing.
Yeah. Look, the thing is, if anyone could explain or predict the success of memes, they'd be stupidly rich.
That's
right?
true. That's true.
That's the thing. They are. You can't always. Certainly, you and I can't explain.
No. I mean, like
we're not generals in the meme wars here.
We're definitely not.
I had to get.
I'm not even infantry.
Yeah.
I'm a casualty.
I had to get a US Studies Center honors student a few years ago to explain to me what a meme actually was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Look, I know them. I know them. I just don't understand why they work. That's
the thing. I mean, the lack of understandability is part of it. Like, why is that George W. Bush, like, ladies and gentlemen, we got him meme so successful?
I don't know.
Gets more annoying every time you see it, but it gets funnier at the same time. Like, I don't know why we should show that if people don't know what we're talking about.
I thought I had it all together, but I was led astray the day you walked away. You were the clock that was ticking in my home. Changed my state of mind.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Love so hard to find.
we got him.
There's no explaining it.
No,
I mean, people can explain it, but not us.
Yeah, I definitely can't.
Yes.
Like the central one, which everyone's going on about, my daughter is going on about.
Yes.
Is this bloody coconut tree thing where she was talking she was talking about an educational, like extending the opportunities for Hispanic students.
Yes, yeah.
And she came out with this.
Yeah.
Part of the extension of the work you will do is, yes, focused on our young leaders and our young people, but understanding we also then have to be clear about the needs of their parents and their grandparents and their teachers and their communities. Because none of us just live in a silo. Everything is in context. My mother she would give us a hard time sometimes, and she would say to us, "I don't know what's wrong with you young people. You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you."
So,
look, it's quite an evocative metaphor in a speech that probably had a few too many metaphors.
Yeah.
It didn't get a particularly great response at the time.
No, it didn't. It didn't. And look, to be honest, I think it's far from the worst thing she's done. I don't think it's terrible or anything. It's fine. It's just nothing. But people have just made this the central meme of her candidacy. Like, it just, like, to the point where, like, there's so many videos of the coconut tree thing.
Yeah.
To the point that when she took over from Biden, like, my man Jared Polis just tweeted out simply a coconut emoji, a palm tree emoji, and an American flag. That was it. like Brian Schatz just tweeted out a photo of him climbing up a coconut tree.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, and saying, "Madam Vice President, we're ready to help."
Just to people who don't know who Brian Schatz is, he's from Hawaii.
Yeah.
He's in Hawaii.
Yeah, with coconut trees.
Yes.
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 Yeah. So, like, I mean,
I can't remember. I'll come clean. I can't remember whether he's a governor, senator, or
senator.
Okay,
He's
right.
senator.
Okay.
It's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Your secret's safe with me, Dave. I'm not telling you. So and then there was at the same time as all this is happening, the Republicans are trying to stitch her up like they had with Biden. And by the way, some sympathy for the Republicans who spent the last 8 years working on Hunter Biden.
Yeah.
All for naught.
Well, I love that Donald Trump sounded like he was threatening legal action because he'd had to spend so much money and time on Biden, and now he's going to have to do something else.
Yeah. Anyway, the Republicans are starting way behind trying to stitch Kamala Harris up, and they're trying to build it around this phrase.
Yeah.
Which in a previous era or in a previous context would be devastatingly effective.
I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been. You know? What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
Okay, so that sounds kind of Marianne Williamson-like, a bit sort of, Crystal-like. Yeah, like it sounds, a bit airy-fairy, whatever, and they wanted to mock her with it. But it's become a calling card.
Yeah, the thing is...
A meme calling card.
There's not anything so obviously wrong with the word unburdened. Like, okay, sure, maybe it's not a word that most people would use more than, say, once every 2 years.
Yes.
But, okay, so they've missed the obvious point because they're historically illiterate, which is that the term disburthened used to be a term for taking a shit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, to disburthen oneself. I'm pretty sure that's in Thomas More's Utopia.
You should be a Republican dirty trickster.
Yeah. But that they've missed that opportunity.
Yeah. But the fact is, it's become massive.
Yeah, and I saw also that Trump's first line of attack. He'll always try out various nicknames. He's like, "Oh, I call her Laughing Kamala." It's like. Not Trump's strongest material there, because once again, like crooked Hillary, that's a negative word. Sleepy Joe, that's something that doesn't have great connotations.
But they wanted to make the laugh a negative. They call it a cackle, which obviously is evocative of a witch.
Yes, yeah.
And they were trying to make that a thing. I mean, they made it a thing with Hillary.
Yeah.
8 years ago, it worked. They were trying to do it again, but now the laugh is part of the meme.
Yes.
They love it.
Yeah.
They absolutely love it. Like, essentially what they've done is, the memers, is they've taken something that might have been weird or awkward and they've turned it into something cool and fun.
Yes, yeah.
And actually, by the way, the more Trump better drop that laughing thing fast, because not only does it help her, but at some point in time, someone's going to say to him, dude, why don't you ever laugh?
Yes, yeah,
It's strange and it's weird.
Yeah.
And why don't you like dogs?
Yeah.
Like, there are some weird things about Trump, and the weirdest thing is he doesn't laugh.
Because can you imagine if you put this in the form of an attack ad? Like, she laughs. She uses a 3-syllable word. Is this who you want as president? Yeah.
But the reason I bring this up is not only is this a huge opportunity for her amongst young voters.
Yes.
Like, introducing her, like you just said, opening her to young voters, but also... this is the thing that really brings out the age.
It does.
And the reason I say that is because not only is it young people doing this, but also the whole point about memeing is that you show them being energetic.
Yes.
And she gives them things to be energetic about. The laughing is energetic.
Yeah.
Whenever you think of Kamala Harris, you think of her laughing, you think of her dancing.
Yeah.
Usually dancing like a doofus.
Yes.
But in a meme, it works.
Yes, it does.
And so that is making her seem more energetic and younger. I mean, she's not young. She's 60. Right? But they're making her seem young compared
this isn't pointed out enough. But once again, when the dishwasher works.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, and if you think about Trump's best viral clips, what are they? They're him dancing. Right? The
Macho Man.
Yeah, the Macho Man stuff. That's what it is. That's all he's got.
Yeah.
She's got a lot more than that.
Yeah.
And it really plays into this whole meme culture thing. So I think that That's really working for her to emphasize the difference in age without her saying a word.
And then another interesting contrast is, and this comes back to the sort of Republicans and Democrats living in different universes of how they perceive things, right? So, yes, everything that she's got around her persona at the moment is like lighthearted.
Yeah.
Whereas the dominant images around Trump at the moment, it's covered in blood, raised fist, promising retribution.
Yeah.
Well, now, to Republicans, that's going to show he's serious, she's deeply unserious. You know, he's bathed in blood for this country. He's taken bullets for democracy. There she is laughing and dancing and using long words.
Yeah.
But there are going to be so many Americans, and not just committed Democrats, who are thinking, do I want the next 4 years to be covered in blood?
Yeah.
You know, do I want the next 4 years to be about this incredibly heavy burden of Donald Trump? You know, or do I want someone who who seems to be able to have fun, who I can probably safely ignore? Who, you know, politics isn't all going to be about the apocalypse for the next 4 years. Now, look, I'm not saying this is going to win her the election, but this is going to be another one of those things that for voters who might have been entirely turned off by the way that this election was going, who maybe admire the fact that Donald Trump survived a shooting, but at the same time can see the way that he's actually connected to the violence. Maybe they'll want somebody who's projecting politics as a bit of fun.
Yeah. I mean, look, I still think Trump's definitely the favourite at this point in time, but I think these things are all helping to make it closer.
Yes.
And I think that, also, by the way, another thing that she's got going for her when it comes to the memers is if you take a close-up of her, she doesn't look gross.
No.
Like Biden and Trump both look gross.
Yes,
when you do close-ups of them.
You pretend you don't understand how memes work at all, but clearly you have some understanding.
Yeah.
Got more than I do.
Maybe, but I'm still confused about why the coconut thing is such gold.
Yeah.
I should also say another thing about it is that this is authentic.
Yes.
This is not generated by the campaign.
Yeah.
And that was something Trump always had going for him.
Yes.
That he had people generating stuff for him.
Yes.
Rather than his team generating themselves. Because you can smell that stuff a mile away.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And this is the first authentic enthusiasm and energy that I've seen from the Democrats online for the entire Biden administration. Possibly have to go back to Sanders.
Well, I mean, the proxy of the donations is a useful one.
Yeah.
So there had been no day since the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg where there had been so many donations.
Yeah.
Those donations are a good proxy for enthusiasm. Now, admittedly, part of that flood was donors who had not been giving anything for weeks because of Biden. But yeah, you're right. Like one of my friends is a Democrat said she actually hasn't seen anything like this since Obama in 2008. Whether that kind of energy is going to be sustained for a long time, we'll have to wait and see. But certainly the actual enthusiasm about Harris is a lot more than was the enthusiasm about Biden 4 years ago. Where it was really just so driven by this is who we have chosen to stop Trump.
Totally.
Yeah.
I've got one more strength before we move on. I've got my eye on the clock here for you, Dave, because I know you've got to go in 12 minutes.
I do.
And that is the final strength is if this is a reboot of the campaign, which clearly it is.
Yeah.
That in itself is a massive advantage. For Kamala Harris. And the reason why is because the entire election, remember, revolves around negative polarization.
Yes.
They don't need to start from scratch negatively polarizing Trump.
No.
But Trump does need to start from scratch negatively polarizing Kamala Harris.
He does.
So he's miles behind. All of a sudden, they've flipped the table from him being miles in front to him being miles behind in terms of the messaging of this campaign.
Now, okay, on that point, this is another advantage potentially of Harris. There was a headline today, GOP leaders urge Republicans to have less racialized attacks on Kamala Harris or less racial attacks.
Yeah.
The first thing that came out was DEI president, right? So Charles Gasparino in the New York Post had called her that actually a month ago when it became clear that there'd be calls for Biden to step down. That sort of shit will play very, very well with the Republican base, obviously. But we should remember that in 2022, Republicans lost what was widely considered an eminently winnable midterm election. And one of the big parcel of issues that they were going really hard on was DEI.
Yeah.
Yeah. As huge as let's get rid of DEI is in gubernatorial campaigns in the former Confederacy, it's actually... First of all, it's not a hugely salient issue for a lot of Americans who often only have the sort of vaguest idea of what it is. Second, you might be surprised to show that polling still shows like positives associated with diversity and even with diversity, equity, inclusion. Even the word woke polls a lot better than you would often think it does. And this is where... The Democrats' biggest problem was that African-American voters were drifting away from them. You want to bring back Obama levels of African-American turnout?
Yeah.
Start accusing the black female candidate of being the DEI candidate.
Yeah.
Asian Americans over the last 4 years have been drifting more conservative. Want to send them back into the arms of the Democratic Party? Start talking about DEI at every opportunity when you've got a candidate of color.
Yeah. I was going to say that ironically,
yes,
let's not use the phrase DEI.
Yep.
Ironically, the most clear-cut example that you could name of affirmative action would possibly be Kamala Harris. In that Joe Biden explicitly, normally when conservatives say that, they're talking about just they're black.
Yeah.
And they call them DEI. But in this case, Joe Biden explicitly said, I'm going to nominate I'm going to choose a black female vice president before he chose Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
And there weren't many of them to pick from. So of all the instances of that, this would be the one which would be most justified.
Yeah.
But having said that, the use of DEI willy-nilly, the way they use it, conservatives,
yes,
you can just replace the word DEI with black.
Yeah, you can.
It's just every single time it's
You
a black
can.
person, they go DEI, DEI.
That's...
And that's what black people be thinking when they hear it.
Yes.
Like they're not going to go, oh, this time around, Joe Biden was picking a black. No, they don't think that. They just think, oh, this bloody DEI bullshit.
Yes, yeah.
Every time a black person gets anywhere, you guys are running them off and pretending that they're not qualified for the role.
Yes.
It's just going to get their back up. It's
It
a
really
terrible
is.
idea.
Yeah. And okay, so here's another thing
Yes.
that happened in the heat of the Post shooting that could come back to bite Republicans.
Yeah.
Elon Musk declared himself a supporter of Trump and also made himself a major donor.
Well, he denies the donor.
I've already seen speculation that that's why Trump chose J.D. Vance, that this was the dowry for Elon Musk.
Musk loves J.D. Vance.
The thing is, if Musk is a major donor, like a lot of major donors, they have this annoying habit of constantly getting on the phone to the campaign.
Yeah.
Can you imagine, and Trump's campaign itself, which is currently looking a lot smarter than a lot of the Republican Party, can you imagine then, the number of calls that they're going to get from Musk saying, why aren't you using all the great memes I'm sending you? Haven't you seen all these funny DEI memes? This is how we're going to win.
Yeah.
But I've got a very interesting piece of Kamala Harris trivia.
Yes.
When you look at Chinese language media, Kamala Harris is the one American politician who they don't call by her English name. They call her by a Chinese name.
What is it?
He Jinli.
What does that mean?
Her refers to her surname of Harris.
Yeah.
Don't know what the rest of it means, but it is. It's a self-chosen name because as she's starting out as a politician in San Francisco, Chinese Americans are a very important constituency.
Of course they are, yeah.
So she actually, she chose it, I can't remember if she chose this name or got her father to choose this name. And this is what the Chinese, like the Chinese media actually uses to describe it. I don't know, like, how that would affect US-China relations. I do think it would help her standing with Chinese Americans. But yeah, that is an interesting little piece of trivia that she actually has a self-chosen Chinese name.
Does Jen Me mean laughing?
I don't.
Maybe they're coordinating.
Yeah.
All right, Dave, you got 5 minutes left before you got to go. The topics which I had left to talk about,
Yes.
some of which I might talk about in Unleashed.
Yep.
Because we've got quite a long one coming up. Is should Biden resign as president?
Yep.
Veepstakes and Harris's weaknesses and concerns.
Let's do some quick Veepstakes.
Okay, go for it, mate.
Yeah. So I really don't know, because any vice presidential candidate, you have to take into account what effect it has removing them from office.
Yes.
Which is actually pretty serious looking at some of the scenarios, because you're looking at losing a senator, looking at losing a governor in a crucial state in the election. In some cases, you run into legal problems. So all of those things will have to be taken into account. But if you weren't taking those things into account, there's been a lot of things about, do you need basically the whitest white man possible,
yes,
in order to balance the ticket?
Yes.
I'm honestly not so sure about that.
Mm-hmm.
But having said that, a lot of the obvious candidates are very white men. But okay, so this is a roundabout way of saying, could my favourite candidate, Gretchen Whitmer, actually be the vice presidential candidate?
She's on the list. They've leaked the list of people that they've sent vetting materials to.
Yep.
And that list is Roy Cooper, Josh Shapiro, Mark Kelly, Gretchen Whitmer, and Tim Walz.
There you go. So someone does consider it possible.
Well, I'll tell you who doesn't consider it possible.
Gretchen Whitmer.
Gretchen Whitmer.
Yes,
She's already ruled herself out.
So she's ruled herself out. So so the teachers union is lobbying against Josh Shapiro.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that he supports school vouchers in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Josh Shapiro.
He's got an Israel problem as well, doesn't he?
I don't know.
He is more pro-Israel than Biden is. I'm not talking. I mean, he is Jewish, but I'm not talking about the fact he's Jewish. I'm talking about the fact that he is more pro-Israel than Biden. The Democrats obviously, that's a touchy issue for them.
So though he in many ways seems to be the best electoral lock, just lock down Pennsylvania's.
He's super popular in Pennsylvania.
Like 3 in 10 Trump voters like him in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, he's got future president potential.
He really does. But there are parts of the party that don't like him.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. Mark Kelly is a bit of a cipher. Like, I think that anyone would be hard-pressed to say what he stands for other than going to space. Now, having said that...
He's very pro-space, though.
Very, very pro-space. Having said that, he does have clear policy... he's got clear things that differentiate him. He's a gun-owning, gun control guy because of the fact that his wife, Gabby Giffords, was shot.
Yeah.
He is at least widely painted as being tougher on the border than anybody else. And those 10 electoral votes in Arizona that he would probably lock up, as well as probably the Senate race in Arizona, that's nothing to sneeze at either. The Southern governors, I don't know, like, does Roy Cooper undermine the age advantage a little bit? Like, he's not frail or anything, but he is 67 years old.
67, yeah.
Been around for a very long time. I'm not sure that his presence locks down North Carolina in the same way
he's very popular in North Carolina.
He is very popular in North Carolina, but hang on, maybe I'm just being ridiculous there because North Carolina was so close the last couple of times.
It was. I mean, Biden was only lost North Carolina by 2 points.
Yeah.
And I know, obviously, they're doing a lot worse now than they did then. But
Yes.
remember the bit which which I'm going to tell you later.
Yeah.
Remember when I get to it?
Yeah.
That Harris opens up the Sun Belt.
Yes.
And
she does.
And so North Carolina is going to be a lot closer than it
Yeah.
otherwise would be.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
Harris is there.
Okay, I've actually hit my time limit.
Yeah, no
so
worries,
that's it for the Veepstakes from me.
That's all right.
No conclusion.
I will pick up the Veepstakes from there after
right.
the white flash.
See ya, Peppers.
I'll see you next week, Dr.
next
Dave,
week.
and I'll see you guys after the white flash. Welcome to the other side of the white flash and Chaz Unleashed. This is the new look for Chaz Unleashed. I hope you like it. This is actually my desk. So do let me know if it sounds good to you, and if Unleashed is looking good to you, and it sounds good as well. Let's go on. We've got 44 minutes left. All right, so we were halfway through the Veepstakes. Now, I've forgotten whether I mentioned that the deadline is August the 7th for both the Veep peak and for Kamala Harris's nomination. So that's 2 weeks away. We're going to find out very soon who her Veep pick is. Earlier in the week, it was suggested that Roy Cooper, Josh Shapiro, Mark Kelly, Gretchen Whitmer, Tim Waltz, and JB Pritzker had been given questions to fill out for vetting materials. Later in the week, a suggestion that maybe more had, but we weren't quite sure. So but let's keep on going down the short list and see who we want to talk about. We've already mentioned Josh Shapiro a bit. I want to say a couple more things about Josh Shapiro. I let Dave talk a bit before. John mentioned on Play America tonight that people call him the White Obama. Honestly, you close your eyes and you listen sometimes to Josh Shapiro, and he is a dead ringer for Obama. It is amazing. Personally, I've watched, it's a guilty pleasure of mine just watching his presses. I love watching his presses. I've watched heaps of his presses. I think that's where he's particularly good. I think he's much better than Obama in a presser when he's off the cuff. He gives super tight, perfectly worded answers. He's a bit like Dr. Dave like that, just off the top of his head. Perfectly worded answers that are intelligent, but they're accessible. He's got great humor as well in his press conferences. He's very much unlike Obama in that respect. And Obama used to rabbit on a lot, and he'd be going and he couldn't give a tight answer, whereas Josh Shapiro just naturally gives these really tight but yet intelligent answers. He's so good at it. He's very engaging. Great campaigner. He's also got a track record of management competence. Like, for instance, the thing he's probably best known for in Pennsylvania is the I-95 overpass collapsed last year when it was hit by a truck. It was estimated that it would take months to open it back up again to traffic. Shapiro had it open to traffic within 2 weeks. Like, he's a good governor. Let me just explain my Israel point, though, with him. Now, I've spoken many times on Planet America, about the problem that Hillary Clinton had, which was in the last few years of Obama and in 2016 with Hillary, the Democrats found themselves winning. They were winning more women voters, they were winning more college-educated voters and more young voters, but it was at the expense of male voters and white working-class voters. And because they were winning all these new voters, they were finding themselves aiming to try and win states in the Sun Belt, which they hadn't done forever. Like, Hillary Clinton was really focusing on Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Nevada, maybe even Texas. They thought was a shot in 2016 because she was getting much better polling in those states than Democrats had for decades. But what happened in the end was Hillary won more votes in all those Sun Belt states, but she didn't win quite enough votes to actually win any of those states. Meanwhile, she lost just enough white working class votes and older votes in the Rust Belt, so she ended up losing Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, which they never thought they could lose. They were thinking about what they could gain, but they weren't thinking what they were losing. It was a trade-off, and she lost the trade-off. Then Biden came along, and he reversed those changes just a little bit. He won slightly more white working class voters and slightly more older voters. And he just took those 3 Rust Belt states back. And because Trump was on the nose in 2020, Biden also won some of those Sun Belt states anyway, even though he was doing worse amongst non-white voters and amongst college-educated voters than Hillary Clinton did. He still won enough to win the Sun Belt states, Arizona and Georgia. And January 6th helped in Georgia. And what we've seen recently is Biden has now won even more older voters. He's pushed back even further, but he's really starting to bleed younger voters and non-white voters. So the original Sun Belt strategy has kind of fallen apart under Biden. So they're just trying to hold the Rust Belt. That's what they're trying to do with the older voters and the white working class voters. Now, enter Kamala Harris. It's looking to me like she's going to win some non-white and younger voters back. But what will it cost her? Is she going to have the full Hillary Clinton trade-off? We can't know yet if she's going to lose white working class voters and if she's going to lose older voters. To be honest, I suspect she will, but that's just a gut feeling. I have no evidence for that. We'll be watching the demographics in the polls very carefully over the next few months to see if there is that pattern forming again. If she does do that, if she does lose the white working class voters and does lose the old voters, she'll be in danger of chucking a Hillary and losing Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania again, and then losing the election. So what does this have to do with Josh Shapiro? Well, number one, he'll go a long way to shoring up Pennsylvania. Normally, VPs don't count for what states you win. It's about the presidential candidate rather than the VP, but someone as popular as Josh Shapiro, he is immensely popular in Pennsylvania. He might just make a difference. Number two, if he holds on to his strong pro-Israel line, it might help Kamala Harris with ex-Republicans, but it could cost her Michigan. And then she would need to win 1, maybe 2 of those Sun Belt states to get to 270. She would be, if this trade-off happens, like I am suspecting it might, she'll be particularly reliant on young voters. Whereas for Biden, they didn't matter at all because he was focusing on the older voters. If she loses a bunch of Biden's older voters, though, the young voters are really important, and the issue of Israel could complicate her bid for those younger voters. So that's why I think Israel could be a complication. But early days, I'm just noting it as a potential issue. Of course, if Shapiro is happy to just swallow his views and support whatever Kamala Harris says, then there's no problem. But I don't know if he'd be willing to do that. But honestly, in my view, the guy's a once-in-a-generation political talent. You'd want to elevate him as soon as you could. And if I was Gretchen Whitmer, I'd be very nervous about Josh Shapiro and what it means for your presidential bid down the track. To Whitmer, she said she's not going anywhere. Quote, "I'm not planning to go anywhere. I'm not leaving Michigan. I'm proud to be the governor of Michigan. I've been consistent. I know everyone is always suspicious and asking this question over and over again. I know you're doing your job. I'm not going anywhere," she says. So we don't need to worry about her for the VP. To me, she seems pretty focused on 2028. On to Roy Cooper. He's never lost an election, ever. In 2020, he was the only Democratic governor to win a state that Trump also won. In 2016, he also won while Trump won. In North Carolina, I'm talking about. He's close to Kamala Harris personally. So there's a lot going for him there. Although the Dems haven't won in North Carolina since 2008. The question is, could they? Back to my demographic trade-off. North Carolina is on the other side of the trade-off. It actually favors North Carolina. There's lots of non-white voters, lots of young voters, lots of college-educated voters. Biden had no chance in North Carolina this year. He was going to get smashed. Harris might have a shot. The Dems have been they were in 2 points in 2020. They were within 4 points in 2016. Personally, I think Harris has more chance in North Carolina than she does in Michigan. She might win both. She might win neither. But I think she has more of a chance in North Carolina than Michigan. And Roy Cooper could help her in North Carolina. So that is a selling point. And by the way, those 3 Rust Belt states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, that we were talking about with regards to Biden, we were talking about like that's all he needed to win. For Harris, that's not necessarily the case because we're assuming Biden was going to win that single electoral college vote in Nebraska, in Omaha. But the demographic trade-off doesn't suit that at all. So Kamala Harris might lose that Omaha electoral college vote, which means if she wins the Rust Belt but doesn't win in Nebraska, that single Nebraska electoral college vote, she doesn't get 270. She gets 269, which is a tie. And then that goes to the House, which will be Republican, because it's not about who holds the whole House. It's about how many states a party dominates in, and the Republicans always have a majority of those. So Trump would then win the election. So she needs an extra vote if she doesn't win the Nebraska vote. And guess what? North Carolina has one more electoral college vote than Michigan. So this actually might work out for Kamala Harris. She would take that trade any day of the week, trading Michigan for North Carolina. So Roy Cooper might help her in that respect. Josh Shapiro might help her in that respect. He might help her lose Michigan, but he might also help her gain North Carolina. He's a good campaigner. He's a good moderate. You never know. These are considerations that we will talk about endlessly over the next 4 months. Roy Cooper is old and unexciting, though. He's 67 years old, so Harris may not go that way. J.B. Pritzker is a billionaire. His family owns hotels. He fancies himself as a bit of a dealer of zingers. Personally, I think he's a bit of a big mouth. He reminds me of Michael Avenatti a little bit. He thinks he's a bit of an enforcer. He likes the fight a little bit too much for mine. But what do I know? He's very 2024, I guess. But I've never rated him highly. I don't think he's going to be the vice presidential pick anyway. Mark Kelly, Dave talked about him a bit, the astronaut, Gabby Gifford's husband, he talked about that. He is pretty bad on the stump. He's got a great track record of bipartisanship, though. If he was a vice president, he would be invaluable in the Senate. Like, he would actually probably be really hands-on in the Senate, helping get stuff done. He does make deals really, really well. Although, if he was the vice president, his Senate seat might not be winnable. Like he wins all the time in Arizona because he's an astronaut and a moderate, but his replacement might not win. So the Democrats might be losing themselves a seat if they. It would be in 2026 though. Katie Hobbs, the Democrat, would appoint a temporary replacement for 2 years, and then 2026 they might lose that seat. Gavin Newsom. Well, look, the 12th Amendment says that 2 people from the same state can't win that state. So Harris is from California, Gavin Newsom's from California. So unless either the presidential nominee moves from California or the governor of California moves from California, they can't win in California, the both of them. So that's a lot of electoral college votes going begging. What's that, 55 votes, I think. It's not realistic. That's not going to happen. He's focusing on 2028 anyway, so forget him. Someone not mentioned out of the short list was mentioned in the correspondence from Polite Body. Asks, please explain why a consummate communicator with Midwestern roots who's proven his loyalty to the Biden administration cannot be the Democratic nominee. Yes, he's gay, but apart from that liability, the man would shred Trump in his ability to explain the benefits of a now and future Democratic administration to the everyday Americans. I assume that plays referring to Pete Buttigieg, of course. I love Pete Buttigieg. I really like him. I think he's a brilliant interviewee. I think he's very intelligent. He's got a bit of the Shapiros in that he can answer a question without umming and ahhing, and he answers it very well. But when I really like someone, it usually means everyone else hates them. At least voters do. It's a terrible sign when I like someone. I like cerebral types, and voters don't. I wouldn't say his time as transportation secretary has been a period of unprecedented success, and that won't help him. He started off with massive supply chain issues to deal with, ports getting backed up, trucker shortages. He took too long to respond to the derailment in Palestine, Ohio. There have been a huge number of airline issues under his leadership, particularly Boeing planes falling apart, but also heaps of delays and cancellations. People have really got the shits with the planes, and they blame Pete Buttigieg. And he also got criticised for taking paternity leave right in the middle of the supply chain crisis, which was an interesting bit of sexism there, actually, if you ask me. I don't think that he would have been criticised as much if he was a woman. Still feels like to me he is made for VP because he doesn't have a lot of charisma. Although I noticed that some of the commenters disagree with me on that. I don't think he has much charisma. I don't think he'd inspire anyone. But that's good in a way for a VP. He won't outshine the presidential nominee. And he's the perfect representative for the administration on TV and for the campaign. The perfect representative. He could obviously lock down some tasks as well. He's competent. Although, like I said, he didn't have a great time as Transportation Secretary. If you're ignoring whether he'll be a future president, I think he's actually perfect. But that proves they won't pick him because I like him. And then my man, Jared Polis, who once again will get nowhere because I really like him. Every time I see him mentioned anywhere, it makes me happy. He's definitely the Democrat who's closest to my personal views. Not identical, but he's vaguely a left-leaning libertarian, which is kind of my world. They call them liberal-tarians. But that's not what I like about him. I mean, I do like that about him, but that's not the main thing I like about him. The main thing I like about him is his personality. He's allergic to partisan conflict. He's just a very sensible, agreeable guy who is willing to work with anyone who's looking to actually get something done. And he doesn't talk stupid. He doesn't talk like he's a bad-mouthing rapper. He's just a very sensible fellow. He's very low-key. I love it. He's a gamer. I love a low-key gamer. If he was president, America would be a very different place, let me assure you. But for him to be president, America would have to be a very different place. That's the problem. He does zero self-promotion. He's never going to amount to anything for that reason. And let's face it, it's the very qualities that make someone suitable for the presidency that make it unlikely they'll ever win the presidency. That's the irony. Aha. And I played this clip on Planet America. I'll play it for you guys as well in case you didn't hear it. This was when the one moment anyone even considered Jared Polis as an actual possibility. He just gave a classic Jared Polis answer.
If she asked you to be her running mate, would you accept?
Well, Dana, we're not even there, Dana. I appreciate the question. I love the job I'm doing. You know, I love Colorado. It's great. Obviously, if somebody asks, I take a serious look at it. But my phone hasn't rung yet. Look, if they do the polling and it turns out that they need a 49-year-old balding gay Jew from Boulder, Colorado, they got my number.
I love that guy. All right, that's I think enough on Veepstakes. All right, now I want to talk more about the weaknesses and the concerns for Harris. We've been through the positives. Time to go through some weaknesses. We've talked about the border czar stuff already. That's the number one. There's no doubt that's the number one knock on her right now. Her time as the border czar, even though I think that's a very unfair term. She certainly got some stink from whatever she had to do with the immigration. Like, it doesn't matter what you say. Her role was, nothing good has happened with illegal immigration in America for the last 4 years. In the end, actually, Biden kind of did her job for her. He did a deal with Mexico in a way that she couldn't. He needed the president to do that deal. And it's helped. It's helped a lot, actually. And I just want to also note the fact that they thought it was okay for her to be called border czar by the media, and for the media to say her job was to tamp down the numbers on the border, and for them not to do anything about it, suggests to me they thought it wasn't going to be a problem. And if they did think it wasn't going to be a problem, they were incredibly deluded and incredibly arrogant, because anyone who had any idea about the way immigration works on the border would have known that when Biden brought in his policies, the numbers were going to skyrocket. It was very predictable. but apparently not predictable enough to them to try and do some damage control for Kamala Harris before it was too late. So anyway, like I said before, that's Biden's fault, screwing over Harris. Although we should note on this topic, like I said, the numbers have really dropped. They're down to 60,000 crossings per month in July. That's the lowest number since September 2020, if that is indeed the case. July isn't quite finished yet, but that's what they're on track for. So that means the last, 4 months of Trump, they had higher numbers than they're projected to have in July. But this is an important fact here. You're probably going to hear a lot about those numbers over the next few months. But remember, those numbers don't count the parolees and the guys who use the app. There's 40 to 50,000 of them per month. So the numbers aren't quite as impressive as they would like to spin. Okay, just so you know, I want to be honest with you guys. 100,000 per month is still a lot better than it's been under Biden until now. It was 300,000 a month under Biden at one point in time. So they've still really, the moves they've made have made a difference. It's undeniable. And in particular, I think the deal with Mexico made a big difference. Mexico's stopping a lot of these migrants. But it may take some pressure off Harris, the fact that she's got the stink of the border on her. We will find out. The Republicans will keep attacking on it because that's all they got, as you're about to find out. The next thing is, look, she owns the administration's flaws to a certain extent, not just immigration, but inflation as well. Mike Johnson was saying, the party's prospects are no better now with Vice President Kamala Harris, who co-owns the disastrous policy failures of the Biden administration. Yeah, she co-owns them a bit, but not as much as Biden did, certainly less than that. And I mean, look, they're trying. This was the first super PAC ad against her, which came out the moment she was the presumptive nominee.
Kamala was in on it. She covered up Joe's obvious mental decline.
Our president is in good shape, in good health, tireless, vibrant, and I have no doubt about the strength of the work that we have done.
But Kamala knew Joe couldn't do the job, so she did it. Look what she got done. A border invasion, runaway inflation, the American dream dead. They created this mess. Kamala owns this failed record. Make America Great Again Inc. is responsible for the content of this advertising.
So that's their best effort. You'll notice that they're also trying to take a stab at her role in the administration covering up Biden's ailing health. There have been some very funny motions from the Republicans in Congress. Some might say desperate motions this week, like Elise Stefanik introduced a resolution that, quote, strongly condemns the Biden administration and its border czar, Kamala Harris's failure to secure the United States border. And it affirms that the American people deserve elected officials who understand the gravity of the crisis at the border and who'll execute the policies to fix the border crisis. And it clearly and firmly states that the continuation of the Biden-Harris border policies would be disastrous for both the United States and the American people. I'm not sure that resolution is going to make much difference. I think it does smack of desperation, as do the impeachment articles that Anthony Ogles decided to introduce. These were both coincidentally came the moment that Kamala Harris was running for president. How about that? Kind of robs them of credibility a little bit, if you ask me. Anthony Ogles said, time and again, Kamala Harris has refused to uphold her oath to the US Constitution and she must be impeached. Her breathtaking incompetence as border czar has allowed a crisis of drugs, rape and murder to flood the streets of America. He also said Harris knowingly breached the public's trust by failing to invoke the 25th Amendment after it became clear that Joe Biden was mentally and physically unfit to serve as president. And declared immediate action must be taken. Yeah, okay, whatever. I don't think anyone's taking any of that seriously. I think people understand that it's not black or white, Joe Biden's situation. There's a lot of grey there, and I think people could understand why she wouldn't have led a mutiny against her president. Number 3, there's a little bit here. There's a lot of left-wing positioning in Kamala Harris's past from the 2020 primary campaign. She chose to go as left as she could. So that meant She literally, like we said before, was the most left person in the Senate at the time. You need to go really left to get attention in a primary when there's 17 participants and they're all trying to go left. They're all trying to do policy. That's how the Democrats compete, with policy, right? And they're all trying to do left-wing policy. So you got to come up with some pretty creative left-wing policies to get people's attention. And they're not going to help you in the general election. And that's where Kamala Harris is at. Everything that happened back in 2019 is going to work against her trying to campaign as a generic Democrat, like I said she should. And like I could do this forever. I'll just run through a couple of them really quickly, just so you get a flavour for what I'm talking about. But there's a million of these. She said, there's no question I'm in favour of banning fracking. She said she'd ban offshore drilling. She said she'd abolish ICE, that's the Immigration Customs Enforcement Agency, and start from scratch. She said she'd use tax dollars to pay reparations to black people. She said she'd change dietary guidelines about eating red meat. She said she'd eliminate cash bail for prisoners. She said she'd end private health insurance. She said police don't make communities safe, and she would reimagine public safety. And it goes on and on. One of their favourites from the period is this. Kamala Harris is a quote from Trump, by the way. Kamala Harris helped raise money for a far-left organisation that bailed a rioter who shot at police out of jail. Okay, what's that talking about? She donated to the Minnesota Freedom Fund, and they bailed this guy out, Jaleel Stallings. He was charged with rioting, attempted murder, and deadly force against police officers during the BLM protests. So they're referring to that. But he ended up being acquitted of all those charges. It's important. Also, his story is, shall we say, interesting. Why? He's an army veteran who had a concealed carry permit. He was in a parking lot one night, 5 days after George Floyd died. The Minneapolis SWAT team officers were cruising around in an unmarked van, just shooting at people. They'd already shot at a family trying to protect their gas station from looters that night. They'd pepper sprayed a reporter, and they started firing rubber bullets at this guy, Stallings, in an unmarked van. And they hit him, and he thought it was a drive-by. So then he shot 3 rounds back at the van. He didn't hit anyone, but he shot at the police without realising it was the police, because they were in an unmarked van just shooting random people. The police aren't meant to be doing that. But then he realised it was the police, so he tossed the gun and he surrendered to them. He went up to them and surrendered, and the police thanked him for tossing the gun and surrendering to them by kicking and punching him while he was surrendering, including after he was handcuffed. One of the police ended up pleading guilty to assault of him, and Stallings won that $1.5 million settlement against the police. They didn't mention any of that, did they? That is going to be Trump's big get? I don't think it's going to work. Harris helping fund the group that bailed a wrongfully beaten prisoner out, I don't think is going to move the needle. One of the advantages, though, that Harris has is that she doesn't need to come up with any of these crazy policies like she did when she was running in the primary. Right now, she just needs 1 or 2 policies, 3 at the most. She's already announced a couple of them about childcare and maybe sick leave, paid and sick leave, maybe. Like those kinds of work conditions type policies. That's all she needs. That's it. She doesn't need any more. She doesn't need to have 1,000 left-wing policies. So this should be a lot easier for her than running in the primary back in 2019. She doesn't need to search for attention. It will come to her. When it comes to her, though, she just needs to not stuff up. That's something she's had a bit of trouble with in the past. So she just needs to focus on preparing every day and not stuffing up. If she can pull that off for 15 weeks, that will help her go a long way towards making this a real contest. Maybe even winning. The next area is Kamala the cop, and that's a complicated legacy as a weakness, because she's got a bit both ways. Like, for instance, in San Francisco, she vowed never to seek the death penalty. But as a California Attorney General, she argued in court to keep the death penalty. She won a $25 billion settlement for foreclosure abuses from Wells Fargo. But a year later, she let Steve Mnuchin off for foreclosure abuses. That was a beauty. I don't like that word. I say on air a lot that I've got a stutter, and people often comment and they go, no, you don't. I do. I'm usually pretty good at controlling it, but I didn't control it so well then. In 2014, she co-sponsored a bill to outlaw the gay panic defense. But in 2015, she tried to block gender reassignment surgery for a transgender prison inmate. Like, not even allowing them to have surgery. Don't worry about going to a women's prison. Just allowing them to have the surgery in the first place. She tried to block it. She built a program for young non-violent drug offenders to divert them from prison. And she gave them proper support and training. That included drug dealers, by the way, if they weren't violent, and we'll get to that. The Republicans have noticed that. But she also, at the same time, pushed for a truancy program that would allow her to charge parents with a misdemeanor if their kids missed more than 10% of the school year. So it's not hard to cherry pick the incidents that suit your argument you want to make. Do you want to make an argument she's too tough? Do you make an argument that she's too weak on crime? You can make either argument. Remember, that was why Tulsi Gabbard attacked her in the Dem primary in 2020. She beat her up for being too tough on crime, not too weak on crime. So, in fact, Trump, his campaign criticised her in 2020 for being too harsh on criminals. I'll quote his campaign. Her record as California Attorney General is also abysmal. She fought to keep inmates locked up in overcrowded prisons so they could be used for cheap labour. She championed laws that put parents in jail for truancy and prosecuted the mentally ill. He was arguing she was too harsh. He must have liked her work at some point in time, though, because as Attorney General, because he donated $5,000 to her campaign in 2011. There's the check. They'll have a go at it, though. They'll try and argue she's too weak on crime, which is funny because, like I said, she's been criticised in the past for being too tough on crime. She should be able to defend herself in that respect because she's got plenty of runs on the board in both directions. They reckon, Trump's team reckon they've found some Willie Hortons when she was DA in San Francisco. Willie Horton is a famous ad in 1988 about a guy who was released from prison under Mike Dukakis's watch and then went on to commit a murder. So they blamed Mike Dukakis for the murder. Apparently, Trump's team reckon they've found a few people who she released who have gone on to commit crimes. One case they're already going on about, which isn't quite that, is in 2004, Harris didn't seek the death penalty for the killer of a police officer, Isaac Espinoza, and Isaac Espinoza's widow was really angry about that. She said they'd taken justice from Isaac and that Kamala Harris was only thinking of herself. So it's not the best case for them, really, but the fact that a widow is willing to undoubtedly record an ad, you'll see that ad, I suspect. And there's the California liberal accusations. Like I said, the most liberal person in the Senate when she was there. She was from California. I reckon that's pretty weak tea. They've been doing the California liberal thing on Nancy Pelosi for decades. People are sick of it. Like, I just feel the effect's worn off. They've cried wolf way too long on California. You can see how unprepared they are, though. I mean, that's basically what they've got. You can see how that's not really enough. When you look at the memo that the NRSC, that's the National Republican Senate Committee, put out, briefing Republicans on what they can say about her to knock her. Let me go through literally the entirety of what they've got on her. They've got her Senate record. They've got that she's a member of the squad, even though she's not a member of the squad. They've got that she was the border czar. They've got a bunch of those things I just told you that she said in 2019. They've got that program I told you about, the non-violent drug charges program from when she was Attorney General, that including that they say she released drug dealers. That's what they're referring to. They said that she sides with Hamas, not Israel. And they've got a big section on why she's weird. Literally, that's the heading. Why she's weird. I'll read you it in its entirety. Kamala Harris has a habit of laughing at inappropriate moments. Kamala Harris pledged to ban plastic straws. Kamala Harris is in favour of banning certain behaviours like eating red meat. Kamala Harris loves Venn diagrams. Kamala Harris loves electric school buses because she went to school on a school bus. Kamala Harris recently discovered electricity doesn't smell. So they don't have much on her, do they? And then finally there's a bunch of racist and sexist shit, like Willie Brown. They love talking about Willie Brown. She dated Willie Brown 30 years ago. He was a Speaker of the California Assembly at the time. It was public. He was married, but he was separated. And he put her on some lucrative boards at the time, if we're being honest. That's all factual. There is some speculation that he later helped her become the San Francisco District Attorney when he was mayor of San Francisco. I don't think that's been proven, but he's given himself credit for it. He likes to chat, does Willie Brown, so there'll be interviews of him. The suggestion that she slept her way to the top, though, is completely wrong. Or it's clearly wrong, because even if she leveraged her connection to Brown to become the San Francisco DA, there's lots of people at San Francisco DA level and higher who didn't go on to be a presidential nominee. She did that herself. So I think it's really unfair to say she slept her way to the top. But they'll make that argument. There'll be a lot on Willie Brown. Also, Trump doesn't mind talking about this either. This is what he wrote the other day. Also, respects to our potentially new Democratic challenger, laughing Kamala Harris. She did poorly in the Democrat nominee process, starting out number 2 and ending up defeated and dropping out even before getting to Iowa. But that doesn't mean she's not a highly talented, he writes in inverted commas, politician. Just ask her mentor, the great Willie Brown of San Francisco. She also briefly dated TV host Montel Williams in 2001. I don't know why anyone cares about that, but they mention it anyway. There's nothing else to that at all. So what? He's a TV host. Who cares? I don't even know why they care about that one at all. Especially given you compare it to Trump's sexual past. Oh my God. But there are endless supposed Kamala Harris logos online involving women giving fellatio and various slurs. I don't think that's going to help Trump much. This isn't 1982. I reckon that stuff backfires. And the race stuff does as well. Calling her a DI candidate, a diversity, equity, inclusion candidate, that's not going to help them. That's just implying she's there only because she's black. And yes, Biden did say that. He was going to pick a black female VP, but every single time, I mentioned this before, every time they say DEI, black people are hearing that, Hispanic people are hearing that and going, you mean black? That's what you mean. It's not going to win votes. And by the way, it's a real double standard to suggest that that's the only time people's identity helps them out, when they're black or Hispanic. There's a lot of ways your identity can help you out. There's a lot of ways, different kinds of identities. Ask J.D. Vance. Anyway, this also gets out of hand really fast. If you play with fire with this, you can get burnt badly because there are dead shits out there who will just take this and they'll run hard. Dead shits like Seb Gorka.
This woman, this disaster whose only qualification was having a vagina and the right skin color, this woman in the Democrat primaries, I'm not talking about an election, in the Democrat primaries garnered
Sebastian, let me interrupt you. Sebastian, let me interrupt you. That's pretty unkind language about the Vice President. This is an accomplished lawyer and senior politician, and the Vice President of your country. Do you wish to take back that rather sexist remark?
No, I don't. It's a statement of fact. She is the DEI hire. She's the diversity, equity, inclusion hire. Ask Willie Brown. Ask Mayor Willie Brown how she got her first job, okay? Just Google Willie Brown and Kamala Harris and talk to me about her qualifications.
And that's the reason you almost never see Seb Gorka interviewed in America anymore. But, I mean, it just illustrates that's not going to help Trump. That stuff's not going to help Trump. So it illustrates that you're taking a big risk when you try and argue those lines. And then she's got some other weaknesses. She's unpopular. I mean, You can't escape that. She's unpopular. The 538's net disapproval of her is minus 12%. Now, how much is that? That is the administration. How much is her? I don't know. But she also is going to have to defend the administration a little bit, a little more than some other Dem would have to. She can distance herself a bit as well. But, yeah, she's going to have a tie to the administration, which isn't popular. Her electoral track record, abysmal. Back in 2010, in the first election for AG, for Attorney General of California, she beat a Republican by less than 1%. Now, 2010 was not a good year for Democrats. It was a red wave. But Obama won California by 23 points in 2008. And the swing to 2010 was about 9 points. And she didn't win by 14. She won by 1 point. So that says a lot. In 2016, she only won 39% of the jungle primary, which was not a thrashing by any stretch of the imagination. And in 2020, she was running second at one point, but the campaign collapsed before a vote was cast. Her ability to run an office has been poor. Her 2020 presidential run was riddled with infighting. As VP, she's retained 4 of her 47 staff from 2021 to the beginning of 2024. And they've been leaking to the Washington Post about how much they hate her. Here's a quote. "It's clear that you're not working with somebody who's willing to do the prep and the work. With Kamala, you have to put up with a constant amount of soul-destroying criticism and also her own lack of confidence. So you're constantly sort of propping up a bully. And it's not really clear why." That's not a great quote from one of your staffers. Okay, so if she can't run an office, think about how hard it's going to be for her to run this campaign. Okay, that it's going to be under massive time pressure. She's had no time to get it together. It's going to be tough. And she's shown no ability to run an office until now. A campaign is huge. 1,300 staff. So that might be a source of problems for her. We'll see. And yeah, she's come off as quite vapid and unprincipled in the past. So she occupied all sides of Medicare for All. At the same time in the 2019 primary. That was one of the knocks on her. But mind you, some of those vapid comments have now become viral sensations. So once again, what do I know? Some other concerns. She needs to prove she's ready to lead. She can't seem micromanaged. Okay, she's got exactly the same team as Biden had. They've spent the last 3 years micromanaging Biden. She can't do that. She's got to get out there. They need to snap out of that mode, get her out there. She needs to represent change. She needs to represent freedom. She can't do that if she's buttoned up and hiding behind her staff, okay? Back her in, let her do interviews, let her do all the prep she needs, but let her get out there. If she can't see the proper interview, she shouldn't be present anyway. Get her out. Let's get her out there, okay? So that's a concern. Also, remember, one of the knocks on her is that she was parachuted in by shadowy forces. If they're controlling her, then the people who are saying, oh, who's running the government, are going to say they're running her as well. Who's running the government? It's not Joe Biden. You don't want it to appear like she's controlled by shadowy forces, okay? So Trump is ferociously his own person. You can't let them contrast her with that. Let her be her own person. Get her out there. Okay. The demographic trade-off I've talked about. Israel I've talked about. Okay, that's all the concerns. And finally, we're just about out of time. The final question was, should Biden resign as the president? Absolutely not. If he can keep the ship going, why would you force a newcomer to begin a new administration and learn on the job? If it's unnecessary, that can't be as good as an experienced hand. So let the experienced hand keep on going. There won't be much to do in the last few months anyway. The government's basically in caretaker mode. So let Joe eat his ice creams, take it easy, and just keep it in caretaker mode. There's 2 reasons for that. There's 2 reasons for that. First of all, for the nation, it's better to have an experienced president. And from a partisan point of view, it's better as well. Theoretically, it could help Harris because she'd be able to show what she can do as president. In reality, she wouldn't have gravitas. She wouldn't have the advantages of incumbency because she'd do nothing. There'd be no advantages. The Republicans would give her 0 in the House, so she'd be able to do nothing. She'd be too busy campaigning anyway, and Congress is basically shut up shop. So and the proof, by the way, I'm right, that her being president won't help her is that Republicans are desperate for her to be president. They're trying to get Biden to resign desperately. So clearly they think it's in their interests. Okay, so from a partisan point of view, it's not in her interest either. Also, I've mentioned this on Planet America. I'll mention it for you guys. Key issue, if she becomes president, it'll create a hole where the vice president used to be, her, and it'll take a congressional vote to appoint next vice president. The Republicans are not going to give them that vote. They're going to scaremonger as much as they can anyone she picks. They'll probably find an excuse to not vote for them because they want to make her look like a weak president who can't get things done. They want her to seem ineffective. So they won't give it to her. And then you won't have a vice president. And then come January 6th, when it's time to certify the votes, the vice president, that's their role, to certify the votes. If there is no vice president, the next most senior person gets the role. And that is the president pro tempore of the Senate. That's the senior most person from the majority party. The majority party in the next Senate is going to be Republicans for sure. So in January 2025, that will be Chuck Grassley, who's in charge of certifying the votes. Do you think Kamala Harris and Joe Biden is going to want to trust Chuck Grassley to make the call whether they indulge the stolen election people if it comes to that? Of course they're not going to want to give them that opportunity. So there's no way that Biden is going to step down. I had all this correspondence I wanted to get to, but we've run out of time. I'm sorry, folks. So this is, look, I'm definitely going to back up with a lot of correspondence next week. I promise you, there's so much to get through. Some of them are a month old now. Anyway, I hope you liked the new PEP and that we're going to have more changes coming up as well. So I hope you like them as well. And thank you very much for joining us on this exciting adventure. Till next week, stay peppy.